Yes.
Can I also ask that just before you're going to call the meeting to order, to just give Taylor a heads up so he can turn it live?
Okay. I'm giving you a heads up, Taylor. It's 1 o'clock. There, I see that. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling to order the meeting of our regular council afternoon meeting for Monday, June the 8th. I will read out the public notice. This meeting is being recorded live and is being streamed on the District of Summerland YouTube channel using the Zoom platform, www.youtube.com, District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public are encouraged to register their name and civic address for the speakers list that refers to items 7 or 9 in advance of the meeting by emailing corporateofficer@summerland.ca. You still have time to do that. Those who have not registered in advance may call 250-404-4052 during the live meeting to be added to the speakers list. Okay, on to item 3, introduction of late items or any amendments to the agenda, Corporate Officer.
There are no late items, Madam Mayor, but I would like to, under approval of the agenda, ask that council amend the agenda by moving item 8.3 to follow item 8.5.
Thank you. Could I ask somebody to bring forward a motion for the amended agenda, please? Councillor Traynor, seconder. Councillor Barkwell. All in favor? Thank you. The reason for doing that is that it will advance the other 2 items so that we can have full discussion on item 8.3, which is solar and storage project, and the recommendation that's before us. If we run out of time, we can certainly extend from the 3 hours. If we go past that time, whatever it is that council agrees on, then we can also continue this discussion this evening at the evening meeting because the agenda is not too full. So that's just a reason why I've asked for that change. Adoption of the minutes is next on the agenda. So there are 2 sets of minutes, regular council of the afternoon one of the 25th of May and a special council meeting on the 29th of May. Any changes or omissions to either of those minutes? All right, I'll ask someone to bring forward to receive those, that they be adopted. Councillor Holmes and Councillor Patton, all in favor? Thank you. And next up is delegations. We have a delegation today from Kwantlen Polytechnic University's Institute for Sustainable Food Systems. And I would just like to introduce Naomi Robert, Dr. Kent Mullenix, and Christy Tadaby. So carry it away. We'll have a presentation from them and then an opportunity to ask questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm going to ask Naomi to share screen if she's able to share the slides with council.
For sure.
And great, so everyone should have seen these in their agenda package as well. But so we're happy to respond to the request from the District of Summerland to delegate today, and we see part of our work to be a resource for local governments working through food system planning and decision making. So we're happy to be here today. Next slide, please. Thanks. I did want to just formally acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded and ancestral territories of the Seal Okanagan people, but also want to acknowledge my colleagues down in the Lower Mainland or on the traditional territories of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katzie, Semiahmoo, Tawasin, Kwaikut, and Coquitlam peoples as well. So we are coming to you from the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems. My name is Christy Tataby. I'm a research associate based here in Penticton, just down the road from you, but my colleagues are all down in the Lower Mainland. So Tony introduced Naomi, who will be giving the bulk of the presentation. There's also my colleague, Emily Hansen, on the line, is a research associate as well, joining us. And together they were co-authors of the report that we'll be talking about today. So that's why I've asked them to join me. And then of course, Dr. Kent Melanix, who's the director of the Institute. So the Institute, if you're not familiar with us, is an applied research and extension unit at KPU. And our vision and all of our work seeks to advance food systems that sustain our local communities, steward our ecosystems, and serve as a foundation for increased local economic prosperity. So we'll speak to you today a bit about the topic at hand, but with that, I'll turn it over to Naomi Robert.
So we've asked here today to speak to the findings of the BC Food Security Task Force report. The task force was appointed by the Premier in 2019 last year, with the mandate to provide recommendations for increased food security and economic growth in BC.
Okay, Naomi, I just wanted to say that you were difficult to understand. It's cutting up a fair bit. I don't know if there's anything at your end that can be addressed.
I can do. Yeah, let me try something else. Okay, sometimes, well, I'm going to put myself on mute for one moment and then come back to you. Okay, can you hear me all right now, or is it still rather choppy?
Still pretty choppy. Are other folks finding that, Council? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
That's strange. We usually don't have a problem with Naomi when we Zoom, but are you able to hear me all right?
Yeah, crystal clear.
Interesting.
Okay. Am I able to log out and come back in?
Yeah, you could try that. In the interim, I can just, well, I don't want to take steal Naomi's thunder either, but strange. Okay. I can try sharing my screen and Naomi's talking.
I can also share screen, Christy, if that helps.
That would help because my computer sometimes gets bogged down with that. Thanks, Emily. And Emily's clear as well, I think, right? Yeah, nodding. I'm just curious, Naomi, if you speak now, if Naomi's doing the screen sharing or if Emily's doing the screen sharing, is that any better on bandwidth? Oh, I think she's muted.
Are you speaking to us, Naomi?
And is that all right?
That's good. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Is there a feedback that you're getting?
I'm getting a bit of an echo.
Okay, one second.
We Zoom all the time, and the one time that we're in front of everybody, things go sideways. But
Okay, is that better?
yes, much.
Okay, I apologize for that. But here we are again. So I will share my screen once more, or Emily, can you share your screen?
Yeah, she's got it shared. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Can you advance one slide, please? I don't seem to seeing that, but no matter. Is this the slide that has the task force photo on it? Okay, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so you can advance to the next slide. Okay, so the task force report proposes that an agritech sector can meaningfully improve. Oh, can we still see? Emily, can folks still see the slides? Because I cannot.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm just
Oh,
getting kicked
we
off of, I'm just getting kicked off of Zoom. So
Okay.
you just, sorry.
Let me pull them up.
Yeah, it just kicked me off of the screen share.
Okay.
How's that?
Yes, that looks good.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so do you want to go up for one slide before, please? Yes, perfect, thank you. So the Agritech, the BC Food Security Task Force report advocates for a vision of the food system that is advancing agritech in a highly mechanized and sort of capital intensive form, with the idea that it can advance these food system challenges related to food security, climate change, access to local food, as well as the farm sector profitability. And I wanted to note that it's emphasizes again a very mechanized, capital intensive form of agritech, particularly related to sunlightless growing, indoor growing, cultured agritech like cultured meats and cellular agriculture, as well as different forms of robotic growing. Next slide, please, Emily. So earlier this year, after the report was released in January, in March, we published a response paper raising a number of concerns around the limitations of this type of agritech to meaningfully address these important food system outcomes. And I'm going to run briefly through some of the primary concerns we have related to this approach, although we won't have time to go into the details, and please do reference the report or questions. Time permitting, we'll be happy to answer them. So the first is related to food insecurity. The task force argues that agritech can increase food security, potentially by increasing production. Although we know from the research, it clearly demonstrates that food insecurity, both locally and globally, is overwhelmingly caused by poverty and inequality, not by scarcity. So people are food insecure because they cannot afford to buy food, not because there are insufficient quantities. With respect to climate change and mitigation of agritech is that potential is unsubstantiated at the moment. The life cycle analysis and assessments at date have found that soil-based agriculture systems do have significantly smaller energy footprints per yield. And the evidence of this is given by the BC greenhouse sector, which was particularly impacted by the province's carbon tax and now receives about an 80%, I believe, annual rebate to remain thriving and viable. With respect to access to local food, there is no substantiated connections that we know of between increasing production and using agritech and increasing access to local food. There are a number of challenges, especially in an export-oriented production system, that prevent barriers for local people accessing local food, and it's unclear how agritech can fulsomely address that. With respect to the final concern around the suggestion that advancing sort of capital intensive technologies will equate to increased profitability for farmers, we have some concerns around that as well. The existing trend in Canada is that gross revenue of farms has increased over the past few decades, while the net realized income for farmers has remained relatively constant, largely due to the tendency for the value generated by farmers to be captured by other supply chain actors like supplies, goods, and services, and so on. And it's unclear how agritech can sort of meaningfully address that farm income challenge. And then the report also goes into some alternative policy approaches to perhaps what we believe is more meaningfully address these important outcomes. Next slide, please. The report, the task force puts forward 4 recommendations, the 4th of which we also wanted to raise some particular concerns around ensuring agritech industry activities have land available for them by the establishment of an agri-industrial zone within the ALR. This would be a maximum up to 0.25% of the ALR, which does equate to 11,500 hectares of lower agricultural suitability classes, but still agriculturally viable classes from 4 to 7. And it's indicated that the Premier's office is moving ahead with implementing this recommendation. They have established an agritech land use secretariat to identify options for growth within the agritech sector. Next slide, please. And recommendations for this, other concerns we have with this recommendation are particularly around the potential to permit a broad range of industrial activities within the ALR, which raises a number of concerns related to permanent land loss for soil-based agriculture, the impact on farm prices and land access, as well as the perception of the ALR as a land bank for future development, as in a way to address future industrial land shortages, which we know do exist both in the Okanagan and the Lower Mainland and a number of areas of the province. Next slide, please. So I just typed out for reference, just our summary of our primary concerns with this, particularly in that the singular focus on highly mechanized and capital intensive agritech has limited potential to sort of fulsomely address these very important policy outcomes related to food security, climate change, mitigation, access to local food, and farm profitability. And then in particular, the suggestion to implement recommendation number 4 raises a number of concerns for ALR viability in terms of protecting lands for soil-based agriculture, in terms of land prices and access, as well as the perception of the ALR and viability into the future. Next slide, please. I believe that is all for us. So thank you. Yes, we're happy to answer questions. Thank you for your patience for that technology glitch. And myself, as well as my other colleagues, are happy to answer questions that you may have about it.
I don't see any hands raised, but are there questions, Council? Councillor Carlson.
You guys got my topic. I could talk about this for days. It's very, very interesting. My first, I'll just give you a little bit of a background. So I live in Summerland, and with my family, I grow cherries. We have about 130 acres. And we export all over the world, but we also have a very strong Canadian and North American market. I studied at the University of Guelph, and I studied at the University of Wageningen. And my husband is Dutch. He's got his master's from Wageningen as well. I've been to the Netherlands multiple times. And so it was really interesting reading through the report that the PZ government put forward, because that's currently the reality of agriculture and the global food system that we play in. But when I was at Guelph, I have a degree in organic agriculture, and we talked about holistic agricultural systems, and we spent, basically there's the entire system, and somehow we now have a report saying let's do this, and we have a report saying let's do that. And I'm wondering, has the province responded to the report that Kwantlen has put forward? And is in that response a way to ensure that we have both, that we have, you know, it's not one or the other. If it was, then we would see what is winning. Some of the hardest working people I know are conventional farmers. Some of the other hardest working people I know are doing a much more small scale, holistic, sustainable, local food system type farming. And so I'm just wondering, where is this going, and what is the purpose of bringing it forward to Summerland Council, as opposed to having a presentation from the provincial government as well, or having it as a provincial conversation? I have a lot more to say, but that's probably good enough for now.
Sorry.
Sorry.
We go ahead.
I was just going to say, Kent, did you want to take the first crack at responding to that in terms of how the province has responded? You're muted, I think. There we go.
Yes, but I think Mayor Boot had something to say first.
In response to what Councillor Carlson has just said, the request for this delegation to come forward is not at the exclusion of someone from the Ministry of Agriculture to come forward. It's always important to hear, varying opinions. It's part of, data collection and critical analysis. But today, this is why they have come forward. I do want to ask, though, if someone from, and whomever you think is best, Dr. Mullenix, if someone from your institute can speak about the Okanagan Bioregion Food System Project. Many of us that are on council today were on council the last time, the last term, but there are a couple of people that were not on council last term that joined us this term. So could you speak a bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Mayor Boot and Councillor Carlson, for your question. I agree with you that there is our food system future absolutely will include technologies, but it also needs to be a food system future that fully embraces and addresses the sustainability challenges of the 21st century. And there is absolutely no evidence that a hyper industrialized food system will do that. And so our position is that the task force singular focus on agri-tech and its supposition and the suppositions put forward really are largely unsubstantiated. And for the province to go forward advancing a food system vision that absolutely is not predicated in good science and is based on conjecture and supposition is not a prudent course of action. And so we are simply suggesting that BC's communities and the provincial government needs to step back and take a good, long, hard look at what the real challenges facing our communities and the agriculture and food system sector are in BC relative to human sustainability in the 21st century, and devise a vision and a community and economic development and agri-food system development strategy that actually will address the sustainability challenges that we face. And again, you're absolutely right. Technology will be part of it. International trade will be part of it. But a singular focus on a transnational, hyper-industrialized food system is not what anybody thinks the future of a sustainable agri-food system anywhere on the world could or should be.
Kent, I could speak to the Okanagan Bioregion Project piece of it if
yeah,
you'd like.
Please.
Yeah. So for council's information, those of you that weren't on council last term, in 2017, I believe it was October, we came forward to council and presented a proposal for an Okanagan Bioregion food system design project, which would be a 2 to 3 year project, research project, a scenario-based type project that similar to one that we've done in the southwestern part of the province to look at quantifying the potential for a more local regional focused food system in the Okanagan bioregion. And by Okanagan bioregion, we're referring to the 3 contiguous regional districts, so North Okanagan, Central Okanagan, and Okanagan-Similkameen. And the intent really is to provide data-driven information to decision makers at the local government level around the potential outcomes of different food system decisions that we might be facing. So things like, what is the impact of the wine industry on our food self-reliance locally? What impacts will climate change be having? Can we have a food system that both meets our food need while also considering ecological integrity and habitat conservation, that kind of thing? What are those trade-offs? And so this project received funding in 2018 and will be wrapping up near the end of 2020. And council at that time did endorse support of the project in principle. And the RDOS has also significantly funded this project to the tune of about $50,000. And this project really is advancing that vision of a food system that we briefly mentioned at the beginning, which is a more local regional focused food system that takes into account local economic prosperity and farmer well-being and multiple objectives. And we feel, and I think Mayor Boot asked us to come to speak because the report, and particularly recommendation number 4 that was put forward by the province, seemed to be going in a direction moving away from that kind of vision and values. And so I guess wanted to bring that forward as a potential, not a conflict, but yeah, I guess a divergence in direction for something that council had already supported in a significant way. Does that help clarify, Mayor Boot?
Well, I will ask Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Patton, not to put you on the spot or anything, but if you had any questions about what this project is all about, have they been answered or has it been clarified for you? Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Patton.
I'm good. Yeah, it was explained very well. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. So I will ask Councillor Carlson, you have another question? Is there anyone else that has questions? Okay, carry on, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. This one, it is actually follows up to what was just said by Christy about the bioregional food system. I'm wondering, I was looking at the document on stakeholder feedback and at the percentage and the numbers of people who have given input. And from what I understand, there were something like 65 participants, 15 of which were farmers. So my concern and my question through all of this, and I know it's something that you've probably got a good answer to because you address it every day, is who is going to be the workforce on these small scale? This is the challenge we face as farmers already, the small scale sustainable production system farm. Are we talking about changing Canadians' minds so that they want to work really hard and be farmers? Are we talking about creating co-ops? Are we talking about bringing in migrant workforces to help with this? One of the challenges that people up and down the valley have is getting that labor, and often on a farm that is doing a farmer's market or is focused on a local production system, they're able to bring in woofers. And that's great, right? Because they've got some labor to come and help them do their jobs. But they don't pay their woofers. They then rely on the other agricultural system to go and make a wage so that they can carry on to their next job. And so I'm wondering, as Kwantlen and as the authors and the proponents of this, how do we address that? Because that, in my opinion, is one of the hardest things to address. The cost of labor is huge and it's very high, but it's not just the cost, it's actually finding the people who want to do it. And so I, with all of my heart, wish that I could just be a subsistence farmer, but I can't afford to do that. So I just wonder if Kwantlen has done some research on that and can put that into the perspective for me.
Well, Councillor Carlson, those two are good questions and it raises an important point. I'm old enough to remember when family farming was not so difficult, when the margins were not so skimpy, when farmers didn't have to rely on foreign labor, but could derive their workforce from local community. And undoubtedly, as we move forward to advance sustainable food systems, having a reliable, knowledgeable, and highly skilled workforce and management force in agriculture and farming force, for that matter, is going to be a significant challenge. Not the least of which is bringing satisfactory economic status to farming, and they're the lowest. They're on the lowest rung of the ladder in terms of this gargantuan, huge economic component of our society, and we simply can't keep doing things the way we have been doing them if we expect community folk, strong farming communities to persist into the future, or if we expect family farming to persist into the future. So your question really suggests that we need to look deeply at what the economic environment that farming exists in, and examine the policy that's created that economic environment. And we've got to correct some things in terms of where skilled and knowledgeable laborers and farmers of the future are going to come from. Kwantlen Polytechnic University has invested substantially in being British Columbia's agriculture training university. We have created Canada's only undergraduate degree program in regenerative agriculture that requires students to spend a full year on a farm learning how to farm in their third year, and engaging in farm-based research to learn the skills to address questions on the farm and answer those questions on the farm in their fourth year. We have developed 2 farm schools to train non-college students in the art and science of regenerative agriculture. And this fall, we will be implementing a graduate certificate in food system, sustainable food systems and food security to train the breadth of professionals to advance sustainable food systems in domains like planning and education and policy making and et cetera. And so you're absolutely right. We have divested over the last 5 decades in developing the requisite knowledge and skills in professionals and in the workforce to advance a sustainable food system, to have any chance of advancing a sustainable food system. But we're beginning to build back that capacity in BC so that we, in fact, can support a viable 21st century agriculture and food system economy. It's foundational to advancing and achieving any semblance of a sustainable society.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question, if I may. Back in, I'm going to say the olden days, many years ago, there were lots of small ma and pa run abattoirs throughout Canada and throughout British Columbia. And the only reason I'm bringing this up, since the pandemic has hit us, some major industrial abattoir plants in Alberta and the lower mainland had been, hit with the pandemic. And prior to this, back in the day when it was more the ma and pa, we had, different options out there for small local farmers to have things processed. And now when the laws changed and everything had to go to the federal inspected facilities, this pandemic has kind of showed us that these aren't foolproof either. Will there be any discussion with Victoria, with government, on maybe looking at possibly going back to the way it was once upon a time? Foods, we're talking food security and maybe smaller plants that won't be susceptible to major problems like we're seeing today. I don't know if that makes any sense, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. I'm just adding on to what he said a minute ago, Dr. Mullenix. You were talking about policy and advocacy for changes in policy. Could you speak a little bit about that in answer to Councillor Van Elfen's question, and also whether or not there will be a policy piece in the final document, the final report that you're preparing? Thank you.
Just very quickly, Councillor Van Alpen, yes, there is a lot of discussion in BC about the need to develop regional abattoirs and other food system processing capacity. We have built a food system in which we put all our eggs in one very large basket, and that does not confer adaptability and hence resiliency, and that has become completely apparent during the pandemic to all that care to look and see. And so, yes, there is a lot of discussion going on in communities, in regional districts, and with the provincial government to figure out how to address the shortage of regional scale, more community focused food system post-production infrastructure. And that will be a key element of bringing forth robust regional food systems that support farmers and confer economic opportunity in communities. In the Okanagan project, we are devoting a great deal of time on examination of the policy environment in which Okanagan farmers and food system actors operate in, and which support or impede the substantial development of a robust bioregional food system. In fact, Christy and Emily and Naomi, who are on this call, are leading this policy analysis and will be responsible for bringing forth a suite of policy recommendations as a part of the bioregional food system study. And then we have subsequently obtained a grant from the federal government to work with the planners in the Okanagan post the bioregional project to engage in a process of figuring out how to plan for a bioregional food system. And that work will occur starting in 2022. Is that correct, Emily?
No, sorry, go ahead, Emily.
Oh yeah, 2021, 22, yeah.
Yeah.
And if I can just add on to that very, very briefly, just the points around the policy environments that we currently live in, like Councillor Van Alphen mentioned around these, the overhaul of the abattoir licensing that really decimated a lot of those smaller scale abattoirs, or whether it's the economic environment that Councillor Carlson mentioned, that those are the results of these policy decisions that have been made along the way as we go forward. And some of our concerns around the task force report is that those nuances in those existing policy environments have been ignored in a large sense, or not captured by the report, whereas this agri-industrial focus overlooks a lot of these really important questions that have been brought up that I've certainly appreciated hearing.
Councillor Carlson.
I want to just bring it back to the presentation that you did give, and I think it's important to note that the Summerland in 2008 made an agricultural plan, and within our plan, there's section 3.4, which actually speaks directly to having a clean industrial area for agriculture. So as you know, Ag Canada in Summerland is on the top of the hill up just outside of Trout Creek, and that was built long before the ALR ever came into place. And so it's surrounded by ALR, but that building and that footprint preceded the ALR. And all of the fruit and wine industry in the Okanagan has benefited from having that facility there, and I think that's mentioned. And so I guess the question is there currently industrial land available in the province, or is that why the province is saying, there's no land available to add anything else to our industrial? Are they talking about, some industries that are going to become obsolete, and being able to change that land to become ag industrial within industrial areas. I mean, I understand it's a really complicated conversation. In Summerland, there's 2 locations that have previously been discussed for an ag industrial zone. One is now just a regular industrial zone, and one just had a piece of it excluded from the ALR so that it could become an industrial commercial piece of property. So I'm wondering, how do you, it's a tough one, I guess. And so how do you ensure that there is that land for those industrial and high-tech technologies that are actually going to be a really important piece of our food system, as just as much as growing crops in the ground? And I don't think you have an answer to that, but I just, it's just, I spin it around and I'm trying to figure out how do we make agriculture the most important thing that we do in this, keep it the most important thing we do in this town. And like I said, without Ag Canada, I don't think that any of us would be doing this. And without the ALR, we wouldn't have a wine industry or a cherry industry, so, or a tourism industry for that matter.
Again, Councillor, your question is a good one, and that's really one of our points. If we need land designated to support agri-industrial initiatives, let's really take a long, hard look at what we need and how we can satisfy that need. It can't be as simple as our future is all about agri-tech, and therefore we need to take 11,000 hectares out of the ALR. That's way too simple.
I agree with that. Yes, I agree with that very much. Thank you.
Council, any other questions? Just gonna check. Doug, I don't see your hand up either. Okay. Oh, Councillor Barkwell, thank you.
Maybe as Councillor Carlson mentioned her background, I'll preface my remarks to say I also have a degree in agriculture, which specializes in food processing. And most of the food you eat actually isn't processed at home. It's probably processed in some way somewhere else. But I haven't really been involved for a long time, but I certainly have, living in Summerland, have an interest and follow things. And so what we're discussing here is really just a land use issue. Is that, yeah, I see. And I too sort of struggle, like if ag tech wanted to put in some high tech container type intensive operations, and I've seen, you know, these things on the internet where you can buy a container and it's ready to go, and it has and you can be producing your lettuce and whatever and no time flat and selling it all locally. But the people are going to put it wherever the land's the cheapest, and so that cheapest land is probably going to be class 7 and 8 agriculture land now. So why is there a need to preserve this land for that type of production, if that's what we're talking about here? Is it, that is the sort of production that is of concern to you on and they're reserving for it?
Yes, it is a concern from 2 perspectives. One is the province investing heavily in supporting this kind of agriculture likely will not yield the dividends that folks are saying it will. I mean, for example, we don't even know if the food produced in those kinds of environments is as nutritious as food produced in soil-based environments. And there's actually increasing scientific evidence of the nutrient dilution in foods produced in these ways. Secondly, we have to all acknowledge that arable soils are soils that are capable of supporting crop production agriculture and livestock production agriculture and forage crop production agriculture are non-renewable resources that the entirety of humanity depends on. And we have run out of it. As we move into the mid of the 21st century, we have got to accept that every bit of farmable land is a precious non-renewable resource. And so, yes, there are great concerns about taking agriculture lands that can be devoted to crop, forage, and stock production, and using them to build buildings on, to grow food in controlled environments.
So you would go beyond just saying, you know, this recommendation to reserve 11,000 hectares, 0.25% or whatever, and say we should have a regulation that this type of agricultural production shouldn't be on farmland at all? Is that where
I would, yes, absolutely.
I mean, there's reasons for that too. It's an interesting discussion. I mean, you could all carry that further and say that vineyard and wine isn't food either. I mean, where do you, it's, there's a lot of questions here.
There are a lot of questions, Councillor, and you're absolutely right. We have put forth a policy white paper on the utilization of farmland in BC, and one of the policy possibilities is absolutely decommodifying agriculture land in British Columbia. It is a commons that all of our existence depends on. There is no doubt about that. There may come a time in our human history when we have to decide how agriculture land is used. Is it used to feed people, or is it used for other non-food purposes? We're already at that juncture. We may come to the time when that's even a more critical and immediate question. As we move into the 21st century, I hope all of you all will agree that the challenges around human sustainability and the health and vitality of the planet that sustains us is absolutely in question. And it calls for thinking around our economy and our society that is absolutely different than the thinking that brought us to this point. And we're running out of time. But bottom line is, as the world's population doubles, we're going to have to figure out ways to feed people on arable land, soil-based agriculture, and we're going to have to do so in ways that doesn't destroy the Earth's ecological integrity or our capacity to produce food. And that's one of the premier challenges we face. This land is precious. I'm not just an ALR just because advocate. Agriculture land is a precious non-renewable resource that all of human life depends on. And there is no substitute, and there never will be.
Well, it's good to get this discussion going. That's I have to agree there. I don't know where to end up, but yeah, get it.
Yep.
White paper is a good start.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anybody else have a question while we have our delegation before us? Some excellent questions and discussion raised, so thank you for that. Could I ask someone to bring forward the recommendation, please, that we receive this delegation for information, the presentation? Anyone? Councillor Carlson, seconded by Councillor Holmes. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation today, the four of you. And my apologies, Emily, I did not realize, because I only have so many faces I can look at on the screen at one time, I did not realize that you were joining your colleagues. So my apologies for that.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, thank you. That was a good discussion. Excellent questions raised, Councillor Carlson and others. I'm wondering if, and I'd have had this conversation with Anthony just to be, clear. If this is something that now that we have had a bit of a discussion and I have a clearer understanding of their concerns and the work that they're doing in the Okanagan right now, I'm wondering if this is something that council would be interested in sending through to our Agriculture Advisory Committee. Because certainly the people that sit on that committee are, that they're right into agriculture and making their livelihoods, at least to some degree. Councillor Carlson?
Yeah, I think that they would like to talk about it. I don't know how soon, but I think they would like to talk about it.
Is that the general feeling of folks here around the table? Great, thank you. Councillor Traynor?
If we send it through to the committee, are we asking something of them or are we just showing it to them? Like, are we asking them to give us feedback on it or guidance or anything, or what are we looking for?
Mr. Haddad?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think it would, again, council, it'd be good to get some direction from council on what they'd actually like the committee to provide feedback on. So certainly direction from council to forward the report and have a similar presentation from the team that just presented to present to the committee. But I think council would certainly appreciate or potentially appreciate the advice of the committee to come back for council's review at the appropriate time. So that direction would make sense, and we can certainly follow through with that.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Just that we have on the Ag Advisory Committee, we have a representative from the province. Christina is on that committee, and I think that it would be worth, before setting that meeting and that agenda, to let her know that it's a conversation, so that if there are things about the BC report that she needs to have clarity on or bring forward, she will be available to do that. I think it's really important in situations like this that we get both sides presenting, especially if it's coming forward and they're going to have, I'm sure they'll have a lot more conversation and debate about it. So it would, yeah, I think it's valuable to make sure she's well versed and prepared to speak to it.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Carlson. Anthony?
Yes, no, that makes sense, Madam Mayor. We'll reach out to the committee, but I think we'll also reach out to the province just to make sure that there's an equal opportunity for them to present to the committee as well. And whether they occur at the same time or at different meetings, we'll try and see if we can line them up to get the picture on both sides for sure.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. We're now on to item 7, which is the first of 2 opportunities for public to comment. And I'll just give a little bit preamble, and then I'll pass this over to, is it to Karen? I guess it goes to you. Thank you. So public, if you're hoping to speak, again, for this opportunity, it's a maximum of 15 minutes. And that's in total. And there's an allowance for 2 minutes per speaker. And again, the items on the agenda that you're able to speak to today and later in the agenda, you you can speak about whatever you like. But for this portion, that's item 7. Oh, sorry, that is 7 is the public opportunity and 9 is the other public opportunity. So I will ask Ms. Needham which items people are able to speak to. And then please, as you're beginning your comments, please state your name and your address and which item you are commenting on. Thank you. So I'll pass this over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this particular public comment opportunity is for members of the public to speak about any item on the agenda ahead of council consideration. And the following public comment opportunity is to speak about anything about local government issues in general. We had nobody call in or email in to speak for this particular item or the following item. And so we do have our moderator. So our IT group is looking at the phone and I'm checking emails, and should anybody reach out to us over the next few minutes while you go through items 8, then we will have them potentially speaking under item 9. So at this point, there are no public to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. That's easy. So on to the first of a few business items. 8.1, the Summerland Recreation and Health Center. This will be presented by our Manager of Recreation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update on the Summerland Community Recreation and Health Center project and the upcoming work to be completed. Staff were tasked with confirming consulting services to lead the community engagement and facilities needs assessment. The procurement process is now complete and the district received 10 qualified proposals. The proposal from Carskadden and Lees was the highest ranked proposal and the team was awarded the contract. Carskadden Stokes McDonald Architects is a collaborative full-service architectural studio. Lees & Associates is an engagement and landscape planning and design firm. These two firms are partnering and bringing together a team of 8 professionals specializing in project management, architecture, planning, engagement, recreation facilities, and health service delivery. Both firms have extensive experience in aquatic recreation and health facilities in British Columbia and the Okanagan. This project work will be kicked off immediately, and the scope includes 3 major areas of work. The first area is project visioning. We will be confirming a project vision, which will be refined and updated after the engagement process and needs assessment has been completed. The second area is consultation and engagement, and the deliverables include effectively and meaningfully engage and involve the diverse community, partner organizations, stakeholders, user groups, First Nation organizations, and local organizations, and to provide the District of Summerland a clear understanding of the program and facility requirements for the replacement of the Summerland Aquatic and Fitness Center, multi-use recreation facilities, as well as the opportunity for collaborative health and wellness center with services which can include primary care and other community services. And then the third area is the needs assessment. After the completion of the community consultation, the architect team will complete a needs assessment, which will focus on the functional elements and a concept for the new facility. The needs assessment will confirm the need and the purpose of the facility. It will include the identification of recommended facility components, including facility space, amenities, size, description, and high-level costs. It will consider recreation and aquatic space, health center needs, and potential expanded components, including partnership with the Summerland Secondary School's gymnasium, and other concepts such as childcare, youth services, and any other needs which are identified through the community consultation process. The final report will include recommended next steps in the process, including prioritized recommendations and consider short and long-term options for phasing over time and as demand increases. The consulting team and staff are targeting the completion of community engagement and needs assessment milestones by early 2021. The Summerland Community Recreation and Health Center Steering Committee will be participating in the rollout of this work, and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee will be consulted at key stages. Staff and the consultants will provide updates and gain input from council throughout this project. Once this work is completed, the next steps in the process is to assess site locations and detailed designs. This critical first phase of the project will provide the District of Summerland and partner organizations with a clear understanding of the community's expectations and needs for the replacement of the Summerland Aquatic and Fitness Center, as well as the opportunity for collaborative primary care and team-based care services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mullen. Council questions? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Lees and Associates did our Parks and Rec master plan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So the same people who did the master plan are now working on another project for us. They may have some history and understanding of recreation and the facilities in Summerland.
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Councillor.
Not so much a question, but a comment that, I mean, it sounds like a really good team you got going, maybe better than I'd hoped for. And you know, hopefully we'll identify what we need and everything. But I have to comment that I've already been getting opposition from to it from people who I don't think really even know what it's about. And so that so there has to be almost an education part from the start to say, you know, this is what we're thinking of. Tell us what you think. Tell us what your needs are. All those things, and before people even dig their heels in and say no, we you know, because they're thinking it's something that it may not necessarily be. So I don't know. It's just this whole public engagement is going to have to be. We can't assume that everybody's going to immediately see it and think, "Oh, what a great idea." They have to be kind of informed as well as consulted. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. We did have a quick meeting on Friday with the consultants, and that was one of the first things that we said is that we will have to first start off with educating the community about what this project is all about. So we've identified that it hasn't been a high-profile discussion topic in our community yet. So that's the first place we'll start with community engagement.
Any other questions for Lori? All right, so if I could ask somebody to bring forward, to receive that presentation for information, please. Councillor Traynor, seconded by Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Great. Thank you, Lori, but you're not off the hook yet. So the next item, 8.2, is the Parks and Recreation reopening update.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with an update on Parks and Recreation reopening plans. As staff, including the CAO, have noted, we're taking a slow and thoughtful approach to reopening parks and recreation spaces. We are ensuring we consider all impacts, with health and safety being the first priority. Other considerations include new required protocols, community demand, available resources, and financial impacts. Some people in the community are wondering why the spaces are not opening faster. And there is a significant amount of information being circulated, including directives and guidelines, which municipalities are required to consider prior to reopening these spaces. And I think it's important to highlight these organizations who have provided specific requirements for parks and recreation, as well as public spaces. So those include the province's restart plan, the Provincial Health Office, Interior Health, BC Parks and Recreation Association, BC Recreation Facilities Association, WorkSafe BC, the Municipal Safety Authority, BC Life Saving Society, Municipal Insurance Association of BC, Via Sport, and BC Centre for Disease Control. The BCRPA has now issued its guideline for restarting operations for the recreation and park sector, which has been approved by the province. The Life Saving Society has issued guidelines for reopening BC pools and waterfronts. And Via Sport just issued last week the Return to Sport guidelines for British Columbia, which has also been approved by the province. So provincial sport organizations will be now creating sport-specific plans to issue to local sport groups based on these Via Sport guidelines. So each local sport group will be required to develop a COVID plan catered to the facilities that they operate out of. And after the local sport organization board approves that plan, then they can come forward to the municipality to request bookings of parks or facilities. So all these sports groups are currently working through this process. The Summerland Parks and Recreation Reopening Matrix, which is attached to this report, outlines 5 levels of reopening phases. This matrix is a working document for staff and is being amended on an ongoing basis as new information and directives become available. And while staff have implemented most of level 2 reopenings, we are now starting to consider level 3 opportunities. As an update, the Arts Centre is aiming to open up on June 15th. The museum has confirmed that they won't be opening up until the earliest of June 22nd. And both facilities are working on their COVID plans. The health authorities have just given municipalities the green light to open up spray parks. So you will see those opening up across the province in the coming weeks. We have a current construction project going on right now at Peach Orchard Beach, but Public Works have confirmed that they can have the spray park area cleaned up and ready to go for June 19th. While the Rotary Club has decided not to proceed with the Sunday market on Main Street, district staff are working with the Rotary's previous contractor who has requested opening up a Sunday farmers market in the arena parking lot starting on June 28th. The Summerland Youth Centre Association's application for the Canada Summer Jobs Grant Program was unfortunately denied on June 1st. And this program provides the funding for the 5 summer day camp staff. The association has made the difficult decision not to proceed with summer day camps this year due to the lack of funding, but also with the new considerations around COVID, and we'll be looking ahead to 2021 to bring that program back. Parents are being referred to the Summerland Boys and Girls Club, as well as the Baptist Church for alternative day camp programs for this summer. The district staff are right now focusing on providing some summer outdoor recreation programs. So taking our traditional programs, which have been indoors, and looking at putting them outdoors. These programs would be offered by our contract instructors and would take place in our district parks. Protocols would be in place, ensuring physical distancing and no common touch points of equipment. And registration would happen online or over the phone. And programs would run only if we received minimum registration. All indoor summer recreation programs, including pool operations and swim lessons, are slated to be canceled for the summer. And we are currently targeting a reopening of the pool for September. While the current amended budget has our indoor recreation facilities closed until September, staff reviewed options and protocols to reopen the fitness room for the summer months. Operational hours were considered for Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. till 7 p.m., as the facility has always been closed on the weekends in the summer. To open the facility, the district would be required to recall 2 to 3 part-time staff to provide the required cleaning, first aid, and admission control for the afternoons and evenings. While it is very difficult to accurately project attendance levels, if we were to open, a conservative estimate to proceed with the summer opening is a subsidy of approximately $10,000 to $15,000 for the 2 months. Summer fitness room attendance is typically lower than other seasons, as it is assumed that some of our regular users, and it is also assumed that some of our other regular users might not feel comfortable returning during the COVID pandemic. In order to maintain the existing approved budget, unless otherwise directed by council, the staff recommendation is to keep the fitness room closed until the full facility reopens in September. Staff are also currently working through protocols and costing implications for booking parks and small activities, as well as renting the lower floor of the Arts Center. Staff are awaiting information from organized sport and user groups regarding demands. Organized sports and activities add a level of risk and require a transfer of liability to the organizations and the groups. Each group is required to consider the risks and determine their level of comfort proceeding this year. Opening spaces for organized sports and rentals may also require additional costs and resources from the district, which needs to be considered prior to moving forward. For example, Public Works have indicated that 1 late-off staff would need to be recalled in order to maintain the reopening of 3 sports fields. Staff will assess the requests as they come in, and staff are working on updating rental agreements and informed consents with the new language as advised by MAABC. Staff is also collecting information from summer arena groups to confirm demands and will complete a cost analysis once that information has been received. Staff are receiving a couple of requests to open the Dale Meadows sports field gate to gain better access to the green spaces. The parking area outside that gate is occasionally getting congested. There has also been 1 request to open the Giants Head Mountain gate due to the increased parking in the lower parking lot and on the street. However, on the other side, there's been many comments about not reopening the gate because it may cause overcrowding on the mountain. And as a point of reference, the road up Knox Mountain in Kelowna is remaining closed to allow for more space for people to walk and to bike. And to wrap up this report, I'd just like to highlight that each municipality across the province is reviewing reopening options and considering a balance of risk, resources, capacity, and public demand and decision-making for what would make sense for their community. Summerland's reopening plans will continue to be flexible and will be adapted based on the most current information available and the directives issued by the province. These plans are not written in stone. However, staff are currently continuing to focus on outdoor opportunities, which are the lower risk activities. The staff would appreciate council's thoughts around the park gates, as well as the fitness center and any other components of the reopening plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Councillor Holmes, and then Councillor Trainer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a few questions. First, in terms of the gym, I agree we should keep it closed. We should be encouraging people to spend their time outdoors over the summer, and so and when you take the economic considerations, I agree that it should be closed over the summer. Just a couple questions. One, I noticed that in the Powell Beach baseball diamond, their bases have been laid down. First base, second base, third base. And so I'm just wondering, are the fields being used at all? And
thank you for the question, Councillor Holmes. I wasn't aware that the bases were out. I don't know if those are our bases or if those are somebody from the community putting them out. But we are currently not taking any bookings for organized play on any of our sports fields. Before that can happen, they have to have an approved COVID plan in place, which is endorsed through their board and through the provincial sport organization. So I'll have to look up where those bases came from, but people can go out and use our parks for passive use, but not for organized games.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Just another one, if I may. So I was wondering regarding our rec programs. So being a tennis coach, I've received the directives from Tennis Canada about how a coach can run should be running tennis lessons in this time, and they're recommending that that no more than four people in a class, and which is about half the number that you would normally have. And so I presume other sports and other programs, it's the same sort of thing. You're going to have to ensure the physical distancing. You're going to have to reduce the numbers, and so the only way to make some of those programs viable would be to increase the fees for that program. So I'm just wondering if you're running into that situation, and because it's a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. Every sport organization has to look at their sport and how they can ensure the physical distancing and mitigate the issues of the spread of the disease. And with that is likely lower numbers, depending on the space that you have to work in. So if you have a confined space, obviously your numbers are going to have to come down. And that's something that we're thinking about when we reopen all of our spaces, including the pool, and how many people we can actually have in the pool, or how many people we can have on the ice for arena programs. And not only do the organizations have to consider that and what they can financially afford with their business cases, that we're going to have to consider that of how many groups we can, how we can sustain financially the reopening of our facilities. So definitely a challenge for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just one final thing, if I may. So when we're looking to reopen and restart some of the programs, are we looking in the view of taking advantage of the opportunity to maybe improve our services? For example, if we're introducing online booking systems for something that's never been in place before, and so that that whatever we put in place, we can continue using it even when things settle down again as a service improvement.
Absolutely, and we've always had online registration. Not a lot of people, or some people, haven't chosen to do that because they're in our facility, or they're comfortable with the reception at our main desk. But we will definitely be trying to optimize on that. And in fact, we're looking at for the fall programs using technology and doing just a digital recreation guide for this fall, rather than printing hard copies and mailing them out, because we know we need to be dynamic and we need to change things, and it's better for the environment not to print. And we're hoping that the community will be receptive of an online platform, not only for registration, but for looking up our programs and for us to promote our programs that way.
I was thinking more in terms of things like if you have to put in place a booking system where, say, somebody has to book their time, for to use the gym or whatever, as a way of controlling the numbers of people in anywhere, that can if people start getting into the habit of using it, then they know, then it's actually people will think, hey, this is a pretty good thing, because I can book my time and know that there's not a million other people there at the same time. So it's I think we should be thinking in those terms too, that this could be beneficial in the long run.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
That's okay. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Thank you. Councillor Traynor.
Hi, Laurie. I can appreciate how challenging this has been for you to constantly be navigating all the information that's coming out and changing when it comes to recreation. So good job with that. I just wanted to ask you, have you been getting requests from people who use our fitness facility, who want it open, or who have may even suggested that we keep it closed? I'm just wondering if you've had any feedback on that.
I've had some, not as much as I thought we would. We're getting phone calls all the time about all our facilities, whether it's parks or playgrounds before. But definitely there are some people that are interested in returning to work out and returning to our facility, and they, you know, would be willing to come back if we were to open. But I am also getting comments from people that are saying, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable coming into a space that's that small, and I think I'll probably keep my pass on hold until next year. So I'm getting both.
Okay. Well, I know you're monitoring all these things, and like I said, they're changing every week. So if you could maybe just keep us updated on that, because if people want to go back and we're able to offer at least that to them, I would be willing to look at that again. I mean, we're the beginning of June, so maybe if things change in July or August, like if you just want to keep us updated on what you're hearing from the public, I'd be willing to look at that again. And then I just wanted to offer my feedback on the gates at Giants Head. I can't really speak to Dale Meadows because I'm not as familiar with that area, but I use Giants Head all the time. And as Kelowna has done with Knox Mountain, I would support keeping the gate closed for two reasons. One is overcrowding. The park is definitely very busy right now, and everybody's using the road to go up and down, whether it's cycling, like outdoor cyclists who can't use their gym right now are using it to cycle, people walking their dogs, families walking. So that's my main reason. And then the second reason is that we're heading into fire season as well. So typically Giants Head Road is closed come July as a precaution for wildfires. So I would support keeping that closed for the time being. That's it.
Good thoughts, Councillor Trainer. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. The first one is, has the Summerland Day Camp always been run by the Youth Center Association and not by the Recreation Department? And my other question is, I know that we had received some funding for outdoor exercise equipment. It was supposed to be at Memorial Park. Is that something that's also been put on hold? Is that something that's allowed to be used during COVID times if it were installed? And if that's possible, do we have an installation plan for it? Thank you.
So to answer your first question, the Summerland Youth Center Association has been running I shouldn't say running it, but they've been responsible for the day camp program for quite a while. I don't know how long, obviously, well before my time of starting with the district. But I've heard way back when it used to be under the municipality, so I don't know at what time frame that changed. And I'm not 100% sure why it was. I was talking to the president of the association last week when we were making the decision around this, and I guess that probably the reason it moved over to the association was to optimize on grant funding. So as a nonprofit association, you're eligible for full wages, whereas a municipality gets half minimum wage. So that may have been a reason why it transferred over to them at that time. But he wasn't even sure, but as well. And to answer your second question about the outdoor fitness equipment, we have purchased the equipment. It is in storage, so that was part of previous year's budget. We decided not to install it because of COVID, and it was a budget, I think, pushed ahead to next year to complete for 2021. But if council wanted to bring that back and implement that project for this year, I could consult with the public works staff about doing that. We are finding out now, as we get new information on a daily basis, that playgrounds, spray parks, and outdoor fitness equipment are all sort of treated the same. So as we are opening the playgrounds and the spray parks now, we could open it just with signage, just to make sure that the community is aware of the risks and to identify that we are not disinfecting them on a regular basis. So to wash your hands before and wash your hands after, and bring your own hand sanitizer. So we could, if it was installed, we could open it up.
Councillor Barkla.
Thank you. My first comment was I'd like to voice my support for the same things that Councillor Holmes was saying. Whatever things we can start to do online, I'm in favor of. When we were first elected back in 2014, we started pushing for online registration for, minor hockey and things like that. And it took a while to get it in there, but I'm sure everybody wouldn't live without it now. Everybody lives by their phones these days. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it, but the younger generation, that's the only thing they know. So whatever can be done, great. As far as Giant's Head goes, I'm not sure if I agree 100% with Councillor Trainer. Everybody's on the road right now because they have no choice. and if the congestion at the bottom, where there is a very limited parking, gets too bad, then maybe that's a reason to open it up so people can be parking at the top. And I don't think that the park is routinely closed because of fire. It seems to me over the years, it's just been in the last few years where we've had some exceptional fire risks that it's had to be closed and for a period of time in July and August. So I would lean towards opening the park and making it as normal as possible, or else maybe certain days of the week or something, because there are people that really would like to go up there but can't do the whole distance. So that's, if you're looking for opinions, there's mine.
Thank you, Councillor Barkle. Anyone else would like to weigh in on this? Okay, so Lori, are you looking for some direction on a couple of the things? You talked about the keeping the fitness room closed until September. We've got heard some support for that anyways. Haven't heard anything from anyone against that. A little bit different from the Giant's Head Road opening. Are you looking for direction?
I would suggest if there's
Councillor, yeah. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I would recommend if council wants to change any of the plans that we have in place right now, which is to keep the fitness room closed, keep the gates closed. We're planning to operate summer recreation programs. So if there's anything in this plan, in this report as it's written right now that you would like to change and provide new direction, then I would appreciate that.
Councillor Barkle. We can't hear you, Councillor Barkle.
I'm sorry. It's starting to look like people could use the outdoor fitness equipment, and rather than just leaving it in storage where it doesn't do anybody any good and it's already paid for, I'd like to see that installed so that it could be used this year. If it requires a resolution to change the budget, then perhaps staff can put that before us. I don't know the amounts and everything, but it does sound like it would be a budget change. But one way or the other, we are going to be spending that money, so we may as well do it as soon as the facilities can be used.
Anthony, do we need it? We don't need a resolution on this, do we? We do need some kind of understanding from other councillors what their feelings are, but.
Yeah, I just want to, through the chair, Madam Mayor, Laurie, is there a budget, do you have a specific budget item, a line for this, just so council can be aware of that before we receive that direction?
Yeah, thank you. There's $4,400, just over $4,000 in the budget remaining, which is for the installation. And so that has been, I think, pushed out to 2021. based on the last discussion we had around capital projects. So that would need to be put back in.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. I think Lori mentioned she would have to talk to the Works Department to see if to fit it in. I think she do that, and if they're able to fit it in, then yeah, that makes sense to me to install those things.
Could I have some indication, shakes or nods of your heads? If you're in agreement with that, that works too. Thank you. Okay, so that's that taken care of. Is there anything else that is a change from the report that we were just presented that folks would like to see brought forward? Nope. All right. Is that good for you then, Ms. Mullen? Good. Okay. Thank you. So then with that one request, could I have somebody bring forward the report? Thank you, Councillor Patton and Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Great, thank you. Now on to the new item 8.3, and that is the Works and Utilities HVAC project. This goes to Mr. Johnson, I believe. Is that correct, CAO? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the purpose of this report to council is to consider reallocating funds from 2021 to 2020 for the HVAC upgrades at the Works and Utilities office building here to address an anticipated shortfall in funding for 2020. So the Works and Utilities building was constructed in 1982 and expanded in 2003. Over the years, a number of revisions have taken place, but the building's HVAC system has not been assessed or redesigned to meet the requirements of the building. So this has resulted in ventilation system that doesn't comply with the BC building code and has led to some issues with air quality and temperature control within the building. These deficiencies were highlighted as urgent priorities in an energy study report that was completed for the building in November of 2019. In addition to this, most of the HVAC equipment has passed its expected service life and is due for either replacement or upgrade. So throughout the building permit process, there's been some additional challenges that were uncovered, which include lack of adequate fire suppression and the lack of historical documentation regarding the sprinkler system within the building. So these have added to impacts to the project schedule and budget. So currently within the financial plan, we have $160,000 allocated for 2020, $55,000 allocated in 2021. But due to these additional challenges, recent pricing that we've received on other HVAC projects, and some uncertainty around the pandemic, it's expected that costs for the project have increased to a total of $273,000. So that being $210,000 in 2020 and the additional $63,000 in 2021. So in order to complete the work that we were planning to for 2020, staff is looking for reallocation of an additional $50,000 for this year from next year's budget. And then we recommend deferring any discussions on the 2020 or the scope of the work in 2021 during the deliberations for next year, once we have a more accurate estimate of the costs and can determine once we've finished the work for 2020 and can have some idea more on where we are with the pandemic. So in conclusion, just looking for a reallocation of $50,000 from 2021 to this year's budget so that we can complete the expected scope of work that we wish to achieve here at the building in this year. If there's any questions, I got Tammy Rothery online as well to help answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Questions for staff? I don't see any hands raised. Could I ask somebody to Bring forward the allocation, $50,000 be reallocated from the 2021 to the 2020 budget. Councillor Trainer, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carlson, thank you. Any further discussion on this? I think that when we're talking about health and safety of staff, it's pretty important to take the recommendation seriously. So I appreciate that. I will call the question unless anyone else wants to comment or for further discussion. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Great, that carries then. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
And on to the new 8.4. This is council procedures bylaw amendments, and I will pass this over to Ms. Needham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this, the bylaw is presented today for first, second, and third reading, following direction from council at the May 25th regular meeting, where we discussed making the order of the agenda match the practice. So the changes are included in this particular bylaw. We do have to go to the public and provide notification of any changes. So the change of order of the agenda items will be published in the Summerland Review, and then the bylaw brought back to council for adoption in probably another few weeks. Just to note that this is just a very minor amendment, and once we have a chance to look at the overall bylaw, once again, there will be some changes potentially to the numbering and the use of bullets and that kind of thing, which has been brought to our attention in the past. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Needham. Any questions? We've talked about this before, so could I ask somebody to bring forward the recommendation for first, second, and third reading of our council procedures bylaw? Thank you, Councillor Patton. Seconder. Councillor Holmes, thank you. Any further discussion on this? I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? No. So that's carried then. Thank you very much. And finally, this is the last item on our agenda other than public comment. 8.3 is now 8.5, and that is the proposed committee of the whole meeting solar and storage project. I will pass this over to our CAO.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report seeks direction from council to convene a committee of the whole meeting on July 13th, including a public comment opportunity so that council can ask questions of staff and consultants, and the community can also provide some feedback on this project and answer or ask questions and get comments and questions answered from the consultants and staff related to the solar storage project. Council received a report from staff on April 14th, 2020, which included the detailed analysis results of the solar and storage project. At that meeting, council provided direction to staff to defer the discussion on this item until we had the availability of a regular meeting with the public in attendance, or the first meeting in July, being July 13th, 2020, whichever is first. So with the information that we currently have right now from the province and the inability, unfortunately, to have the public gather at a larger meeting, July 13th is currently slated for this item to come back for council's consideration. Over the last few months, and obviously before that, staff have received a number of questions related to the project, including those related to the site selection process and the project feasibility and the various technical components that are attached to a project like this. Although there have been some engagement opportunities regarding this project over the last couple of years, staff believe that it providing an additional opportunity at this time in the process on July 13th through the committee of the whole session that's being recommended is an appropriate mechanism for council and the community to provide some additional feedback and have any unanswered questions answered at that time for this process. Currently, right now on July 13th, the agenda item would be slated for an evening meeting. The 15 minutes allocated at the beginning and end of the regular meeting is not expected, based on the feedback that we've heard, to be adequate for the community to speak to council and provide their input on this matter. So the format of the committee of the whole meeting would be to allow for those in the community wishing to speak to council on this matter to register in advance to a speakers list, similar to what this scenario is for the council meetings moving forward, or to call into a meeting to participate via the electronic meeting that would be scheduled. Staff would advertise this feedback opportunity and comment opportunity for the local media, within the local media and on the district's webpage and through our social media sites as well. There's obviously been a lot of technical analysis that's gone into the process so far. So as I mentioned, it'll be important to have the range of consultants available to answer all those questions at the meeting as well. And that includes consultants with regards to the pre-feasibility study, the system impact and interconnection study, the financial analysis, the environmental inventory, the geotechnical assessment, and the preliminary site investigation reports completed for the site as well. In recognition of what is certainly an important project for council and the community, a significant budget allocation for this project, staff believe that providing this additional opportunity for council and the community to provide feedback and receive answers to many questions on this project dealt with on the July 13th meeting at the committee of the whole is an appropriate opportunity for the comments to be received and next steps in the council's decision-making process on this item. So the staff recommendation is for council to convene a committee the whole meeting on July 13th, 2020 at 1 p.m. to receive a presentation of the solar storage project detailed site analysis results and recommendations as outlined in the staff report dated April 14th, 2020, and that council provide an opportunity for the community to participate at the meeting whereby council can hear feedback from the community and staff consultants can answer questions from council and the community related to the solar and storage project. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Haddad. Okay, questions of council. Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Van Elfen.
Yeah, just for clarification then. So on the 13th of July, we're going to be taking questions from the public on anything to do with the solar project or just regarding the site selection?
So through your chair, Madam Mayor, the intention would be to have all the technical components or technical consultants available to speak. So the questions could relate to anything with regards to the project, anything with regards to the solar and battery storage project.
Okay, and then just to follow up, so who will be in attendance to answer the questions?
So there will be, through the chair, Madam Mayor. So we'll have a representative from each of the consultants that have been involved in the project so far. So we'll have a representative from Bench Consulting, Primary Engineering and Construction, Fractal Energy Storage Consultants, Maconis Consulting, and WSP, who have completed the recent geotechnical and environmental reports on this project. So we'll have those consultants, the intention, should council provide direction, we'll have those consultants in attendance to answer those questions, in addition to district staff, of course.
If I could just jump in here. Will there also be somebody that can speak to the environmental assessment?
Yes, through the chair, Madam Mayor, we have the consultant that wrote the report, the environmental report, but also the districts. We have a contract with the regional district for the South Okanagan Similkameen Conservation Program that has the ability to review those reports as well. So we'd have their representative in attendance as well.
Good, thank you. Did that answer your questions, Councillor Holmes? Good, okay. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there any possibility that this could get pushed somewhat into the future, this meeting, until so public can be in attendance? You know, I have a feeling that there's a lot of people out there in the community that don't have the capabilities of, you know, logging in on Zoom. A public meeting would be, I think, would be a better situation. Would the arena banquet room be a possibility that we could set up a council meeting in there? We could have our, you know, our self-distancing with counselors, and you're allowed up to what, 50 people at a time to come into that meeting? I think it would be better to have public there in person. And I think it would be more beneficial to council and to the public. Just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, Your Worship, the that ability certainly exists. Right now, we're unfortunately under the restriction of the gathering of 50 people or more. Will certainly, I think, limit that ability in the short term. The time frame in which that provincial order will change is unfortunately uncertain right now. So I guess right now it is extremely difficult to predict the time frame that we could actually hold a meeting like that. And that was obviously part of the discussion when council had the public attendance versus the first meeting in July. So we're sitting about a month out from that time frame right now, with no no crystal ball, unfortunately. It's tough to predict right now.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, you were on mute and now you're unmuted. You
Oh,
say
sorry.
Councillor Carlson?
Councillor Carlson, you're next, and then Councillor Pat.
Thank you. There's something about what Councillor Van Alphen just said that I think is very valid. I don't think that we need to push this meeting, at least the first one, further than July 13th. I think that council should be allowed and able to meet in the arena banquet room, and a few members of staff. Whether we have virtual presentations as well and are able to live stream that meeting so that there is some public present in the room. Perhaps you can still put 30 people at a safe distance and stay under the 50-person quota, and also have it available so people can see what's going on and call in. I think it's worth talking about how to do that and if it's possible. And you know, if we end up with a consultant from each of these firms, perhaps they can continue to use Zoom and have a platform set up to do it that way. I know it's a lot of work for IT and to sort of work around, but I do wonder if it might be possible. It's still a month away.
For sure, there's through the chair, Madam Mayor, I think there's lots of opportunity to look at different ways of doing it. The having council all in one room and and the public participate online, for example, is one way of doing it. We'd have the opportunity to potentially set a maximum number of attendees in the room, and that would likely be something we'd have to look at to actually hold it in the arena or the arena banquet room, for example. So there's a few different solutions out there that we could look at increasing the ability for the public to be present at the meeting, but recognizing that we'd have to look at some obviously some strict protocols in how that would occur.
Okay, Councillor Carlson. Good. Okay, Councillor Patton, and then Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do agree with Councillor Van Alphen also. One of the things that that did come to light with our CAO, I believe it was last week, that sent us the email indicating that UBCM did say that we could do, if we needed an extension, for 15 to 18 months. So realistically, there's no great urgency that the public couldn't be involved in regards to having some say in what's moving forward with the project. And so I am in total agreement with Councillor Van Alphen in regards to allowing our citizens to in an open forum in regards to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. Councillor Barkle and then Councillor.
Yeah, but before I speak, I think I saw our CAO maybe had a comment that might be relevant before I.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Barkle.
Yeah,
Anthony?
thanks, Mayor, and yeah, just to the point around the grant funding, and yeah, the discussion was had with UBCM around the grant allocation and the timeline, and certainly there's flexibility in the extension to the September 2023 deadline, but the concern would be, I guess, not having anything under construction. I guess if the project was to move forward, not having anything under construction close to that timeline. If consultation was postponed 15 months, for example, we're getting significantly tight to be able to actually implement a project. So if we're sitting here a year from now, for example, I think the ability to actually complete the project by that time would have a significant concern. So there's the ability certainly towards the end of the project of flexibility in the timeline, but that would be, I guess, for a project that is quite a way under construction.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I do apologize. I wasn't inferring that we push it out a year to 15 months. I was just saying that it would give the opportunity for our citizens for public consultation with us. And that as the project progresses, we would have that additional time for completion. But yeah, not to push it back that long. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barkle.
Yes, I think the whole point of asking Anthony to contact UBCM about the extension was so that we could see if we would be able to have a public meeting with people in attendance. I never thought of, it wasn't in my mind, waiting 12 or 15 months for that kind of meeting, but perhaps we could wait until the fall anyway and see how things look then. Failing that, sometime in the fall, we would have to try and make an arrangement, with this 50-person limit. But it seems like as we go along, these the group sizes continue to get bigger and bigger. And in addition to that, I don't think we can have a meaningful discussion until we get a few answers to a few questions. In particular, as I pointed out in my email, we don't even have a proper analysis using a expected period of time that this project will be there. So until that decision is made, there is no meaningful financial analysis. And there's work to be done yet. We're going to need the decommissioning costs so that people can talk about that. We should rightly have an appraisal. I think that there's going to be a groundswell of, well, already is a groundswell of people in the community that feel that that should be relevant. And so we should have that information. And,
I'm just going to interrupt for a moment. I appreciate you giving your comments on this and the reasons why, but right now we're asking questions of Councillor Haddad, CAO Haddad. If you would like to bring forward a resolution to support any of your feelings on the appraisal or whatever else, you certainly can do that. Just wanted to.
No, I feel like I'm explaining why we need to push this public consultation meeting a little bit beyond July 13th, is because we need this additional information. And this is the additional information that we need. And furthermore, I think some of the additional information we need is on, because it's not people are not going to have questions for primary engineering. They have questions on land use. And one of the basis for this decision, or for putting this thing forward as the preferred location, was the suggestion that we didn't really need this land for development. So we need some sort of a report that says what land is available and how much do we need and how badly do we need this land or not. I mean, otherwise it's based on speculation. I could prepare a list of questions that I think need to be answered before we go into the public discussion.
Councillor Barkwell, if you would like to put a resolution on the floor that we can have seconded and continue this discussion. Again, if you have questions of Mr. Haddad, this is the time to ask them. Of course, you can ask it once something is on the floor as well. But what you're suggesting, and it's totally valid, you're providing your reasons. Because this is what you are suggesting, and it's your thoughts and opinion. We need to have a something that is agreed to by the majority of council to carry on with this. Are you understanding?
So
because we all need to be able to have part of the discussion, be part of the discussion, but we can't have a discussion until there's something on the floor to discuss. That's really what I'm saying.
I guess that's a preface to my motion that we defer the presentation on the solar site and battery storage location and project in general to October, and so that further information can be gathered and the possibilities of the public in attendance are better.
Thank you for putting that forward, Councillor Barkwell. Seconder on this, and then we can have further discussion. And I realize Councillor Holmes, you're up next. Councillor Patton, you're seconding? Great, thank you. Over to you, Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. I can't support this motion. I think we have a small window over this summer where we're actually able to do some public engagement before the second wave hits. In October, we're going to be in the middle of the second wave. We're going to be back in lockdown. It's crazy to think that things are going to be opening up again. I think this summer we've got a little window where we could gather in the banquet room. We could let people in a controlled manner to make sure we're under that 50 number, to speak to us in person if they wish, while maintaining our physical spacing. People could phone in. Now is the time to do it. We can't wait until the fall because we don't know what's going to be happening with the pandemic in the fall and the second wave. So we have to do it now. And I just want to add that there's a lot of misinformation that's being spread about this project right now, and I don't think just having the consultants present is good enough. We're going to because they're not going to be answering some of the questions that people have based on this misinformation out there. We're going to need people who are able to explain to us the future trends in electricity utility industry. We're going to need people to explain what resilience means, what peak shaving means, what the provincial BC, Clean BC, and the federal transition pathway programs are, and how community energy generation fits into those programs. We're going to need people to explain how a project like this can benefit local economic development. So we need all those kind of expertise at this meeting to answer all the questions. If we're going to have a free-for-all of questions, which is what we're going to get, rather than just the site location, which I think is the only thing that's actually left for us to discuss, then we're going to need a lot of expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. I'm not sure which of the Aarons had their hands up first. I don't know. I've put down Councillor Traynor. That was the first one I noticed. Then Councillor Carlson, and then Councillor Van Elfen. Thank you.
I completely agree with Councillor Holmes. In addition, we already voted to have our first meeting on July 13th, so we've made that public. I do agree, however, that having it in the arena somehow, if we can do that, would be a really good idea. And I'm just throwing this out there, but what's the harm in starting or having our first meeting on July 13th and starting to answer some of the questions and kind of seeing what our feedback is, with the I guess expectation that we may have a second or third meeting in which we could answer more questions. So I don't think that there's any harm in starting the discussion on July 13th with what we have right now. And then that might give us opportunity to kind of see what the discussions are out in the public and maybe have a second or third meeting and answer those questions. But I think that we need to start now because we don't know what's going to happen in the fall. We have been told that there will be a second wave. And we've already said that we would start on the 13th. So I think we should get started.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Yes, I find myself agreeing with Councillor Trainer and Councillor Holmes. This conversation needs to get underway. When we talked about this back in April, it was deemed not good enough to talk about it again in April, and we had to push it to a time where we would have the ability to speak with the public in attendance. And if we can find a way to ensure that the public can safely attend this meeting and that council can safely attend this meeting, then I think we need to proceed. And if we need to have 2 or 3 or 4 meetings so that everyone is able to enter the room to see the council in person, then I think that we should go there too, and that we should make sure that these meetings are live streamed and that anyone who wants to watch that doesn't feel comfortable going out in public can be there. But like has been said, there's going to be another wave of this and we're all going to get shut down again. And if that is what is going to jeopardize the entire solar project, then I will not. I don't think that is fair. And I think that we've been talking about this for years that this has been underway. And we can come up with more excuses to push it further and further, but I think that we have an opportunity, so we should take it.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Van Alphen, followed by Councillor Barkwell.
I don't have a problem with the July 13th date as long as public can be in attendance or some type, that they can be there to participate in this. Like Zoom and other venues don't necessarily work for everyone. I think people should have the ability to attend if that's possible. And my concern is, does that give staff enough time to bring in the so-called experts? That's my only question.
Yeah. Madam Mayor. So I think over the next, if council provide direction to, I guess, enhance the meeting and provide direction to enable at least some members of the public to participate in the meeting, then we'll need to work over the next week to make sure logistically we can make that happen. And maybe Karen can speak to the technological side of things at the arena and whether or not we could live stream the meeting there, so we can maybe have that answer shortly. But in terms of answering questions, we're intending on trying to put together an updated frequently asked questions list. There's a document that's already been, I think, circulated online with a number of questions. And based on the questions that we've had come in over the last few weeks, we've been in the process of trying to update that information as well. But we'd certainly like to try and obviously focus the discussion where we can, so we have the right people in attendance at that meeting. If it's around land use, if it's around the economics, if it's around the technical components of the solar and battery project, then if that's the direction council want to head in, we definitely want to make sure we invest in the right range of professionals to be available, in addition to staff who have some history on this project as well. Karen, do you want to speak to the ability for the arena banquet room, for example, to host a council meeting?
Certainly, thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I'm sure that there's some way that we can actually do a bit of a hybrid. The live streaming we would have to test and see to see whether or not we can make the Zoom meeting work. It might involve a little bit of extra technical support, I would suggest. So we might be required to have additional staff on site or a consultant that could come in and help us manage the electronic part of it. And then of course, other staff working to ensure we have the right protocols in place for members of the public. And should there be people coming in and out, we'll just kind of monitor that situation as well. So what I would see happening is somehow trying to have a Zoom meeting that's live, but with a camera on council who's physically sitting there. So that's where the additional expertise will have to come into play, I'm sure. So if council would like, and Anthony, I can certainly look into that and see what we can do.
Thank you. Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Holmes.
Did I see Councillor Patton have his hand up there? Oh, okay, all right. You know, Councillor Holmes has a point there. I hadn't thought about the second wave and whether it will or will not come, but I still have the concern that all the information that we require to have a meaningful discussion will be available by July 13th. You know, in particular, the financial analysis really has to be redone. Now, maybe that's not, well, actually that shouldn't be a big deal, but there has to be a decision made on just how long and how many years the project is based on. You have to make a decision. Are you going to replace the batteries after 20 years because you want them to last until the solar panels supposedly expire in 35 years? Or do you go with the what I've just have been told by experts in the field, that it's standard of 25 years for the solar panels, and then the batteries, they say, are scheduled for a lifetime of 20 years. Do you then budget in that you're going to replace those batteries for the last 5 years, or not have them at all and have solar only? These questions are probably maybe for discussion by council to decide exactly what the plan is. But right now, we don't have a plan. You don't have a project. You got a mishmash of lifetimes for these two components. And I don't know how we're going to handle that, and it's going to need some time to work out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, just back to what we were talking about in terms of the venue. It doesn't necessarily have to be the banquet room. I guess, you know, once Karen looks into it, if there's another place where that works better for technical reasons, there's no reason you couldn't even do it in the council chambers if that worked better, and you just had one member of the public one at a time come in. I think even that would work. So I leave to staff to find the best solution, but and the best venue. But you know, I see no reason why it can't be done. And just in response to Councillor Barkwell's comments there, and I think I don't think you get too hung up about the replacement costs, because 25 years from now, it's going to be completely different than it is now. We might not want to replace it. We might as we gain experience in generating our own electricity, we might find their new technologies have become mainstream, and we'll want to look at doing something different, like putting turbines in our water mains or something like that. Or maybe we'll replace the solar panels by allowing members of the community to purchase those solar panels and going, starting that kind of program. There's so many options, so many possibilities out there that it's a rapidly changing landscape that we're dealing with. This industry is in the midst of an upheaval, that the electricity industry that looks like today is going to look like nothing that it is 30 years from now. And so you're trying to think of a replacement cost for something that doesn't exist, and that's not possible. And I'd happy to talk about this more, because I really think we've lost sight of the big picture. We need to bring back and think of the big picture and why we're doing this. For years, Summerland's electricity utility has suffered from this lack of investment, and our work on asset management has confirmed that of all our municipal assets, the electrical one has the biggest infrastructure deficit, right? People complain about our roads, but if they could see our electricity utility, they wouldn't be complaining, they'd be scared. And so when we were elected, the previous council elected in 2014, we decided we'd put all our cards on the table and review our options for the electricity utility. That included selling it off, which was a recommendation in a 2013 report from the council before that. And in our 2015-2019 strategic plan, which I have here, this one here, you might remember that backwards, but it's item P4B of the balanced scorecard with the heading, review the impact of a potential sale of the electrical utility. The district, this is I'm quoting from the strategic plan, the district wants to explore the impacts of selling the electricity utility. In 2014, the district met with Fortis BC to determine if there was an interest on their part to purchase the utility, and learned that the verification of the assets of the utility is key to any further discussions. So we considered selling the utility, and that upset a lot of people. And I can't help but note that many of the people who were against the idea then are the same people who are against the solar project today. So council at the time, we decided would be the community's best interest if we kept the utility, and but we needed to invest in it. And we needed to start running it like a business. And we created the general manager position, because if we're going to run it like a business, then we should know, we should have somebody who knows actually how to run the business. We even talked about making the utility a municipally owned company with either the council or acting as the board of directors, or appointing an external board, or having a mixture of the two. And it was further decided to grow our business by generating some of our own electricity, because simply being a passive redistributor of electricity wasn't a sustainable business model. If we were in fact members of an electricity utility company right now, we would know that the industry is facing dramatic upheaval. As I just said, it's going to look completely different 30 or 40 years from now. It will be more elastic, more decentralized. Smart grids and smart meters will allow everyone to become what they call prosumers, so that you're producing and consuming electricity both sometimes exactly at the same time. So for example, in the future, you'll have your electric car, you plug it in during low demand, and then later that idle car will be feeding back into the grid, so that our e-cars will also be electric storage units. And as the grid modernizes, millions of cars, buildings, micro generation facilities will all become load centers, peak shavers, and with IT being used to constantly move electricity from here to there and back again. And it's a completely different way to think about electricity. And so ratepayers are going to become active participants in this system. And if we just sit here and do nothing, our customers are going to end up knowing more about our business than we do. People will circumvent and eventually desert us, just the same way that people are deserting landline telephone lines right now. And we'll be left with this obsolete infrastructure and heavily in debt. And if that's the direction we plan to go, then we better sell off that utility right now pretty quick. Because our only other choice is to become a player and to get in the game. The previous council, we directed staff to do the research, and we made the decision that solar was the best first step because it's a proven technology. It's relatively simple to understand and implement, and the cost of solar panels is dropping dramatically. And so that's why we went down the road we did. It was in our last council strategic plan. It was the number 2 item on our strategic plan. We had election campaign in between that where nobody campaigned against this project. And so if we're talking about even not doing this project at all, if the issue is the location, that's fine, we're going to sort that out. But if the issue is whether we do this project or not, then I think that's would be a tragic loss for this community. So I'm sorry for the rant, but I have a lot more to say if you want to hear it.
No need to apologize, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Patton.
Well, I think Councillor Holmes has identified that there is 2 issues here. There's the location and whether it should be done at all. And all of the things that he talked about, smart grids and stuff, are not really relevant to this decision or whether it's a rational decision to have a solar project in Summerland at this time. Now, I will agree that it's quite possible that things would change in the future as you know, the solar panels come down in price, battery storage comes down in price. All those things are quite possible. But we're talking about what you can do today, not what you can do 10 years from now. And so we have to make a rational decision. A rational decision, and if you want to be a business you would look at it exactly as a business would. And I can guarantee you a business model would incorporate, if you were planning to put it into a temporary location, that the cost of decommissioning, the cost of replacement of assets, it's done all the time. It's done for big projects, little projects. We have to do it for our landfill, the cost of decommissioning a landfill. You have to do it for, if you're going to be building another Brenda Mines, you factor in what the decommissioning cost would be, the lifetime, the expected lifetime of the equipment, which ones would have to be replaced. So yes, I agree. We got to look at it as a business. We thought solar was worth investigating. When we get the right information, then we'll make that decision. And then that would also incorporate some sort of moral question maybe for the taxpayers of Summerland, because it might be worthwhile to put it somewhere where, sure, the taxpayers of Summerland would benefit from this solar power, but taxpayers of Canada, because it's grant money, we're only putting up $1 million. And if you consider that other $6 million is free, well, then it's worthwhile doing. If you think about it as a whole, then it's not worthwhile doing. But I guess we're really talking about how long do we want to wait until we have this bigger discussion with more people to chip in. So July 13th, it doesn't look like people will want to wait any longer. I certainly agree with trying to accommodate more people in the room. Maybe the arena itself, you can social distance further, but there's a lot more questions than there are answers right now to be able to make that rational decision. And it's both a business decision and a land use decision.
Councillor Barkwell, are you suggesting that you would amend your motion? Maybe first I'll have Ms. Needham read the motion again, the one that we're talking about right now, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That council defer the presentation on the solar and battery storage site location and the project in general until October, following further information being gathered.
Thank you. Sorry. Back to you, Councillor Barkwell. Thank you, Councillor Carlson. I realize that Councillor Patton and Councillor Carlson also want to speak to this.
I can see where this is going. I think the simplest thing is to have our discussion, and it'll probably be defeated, and then we'll go from there.
So we're still looking at the October date. That's what you're saying? Okay, thank you. Councillor Patton and then Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I applaud Councillor Holmes' passion. You just can't buy that passion. He did hit the, as Councillor Barkwell spoke about, he did hit the two main points. And for me personally, I'm for solar. I have been, we can go back into all our council meetings when we talked about site and the site location for it. And I have been against the Cartwright Mountain site from day one, and brought that up with our previous CAO also. So, Councillor Barkwell, the numbers that man has produced and the information and the depths of his research that he's gone into is to be commended. And I do look forward to public interaction in regards to in the project as a whole, but I truly am really interested to see the direction it goes, more so on location, which again, to me was is the part that was a little bit maybe misleading might not be the correct term, but was put forward in such a manner that we really didn't have the time to review, and where a decision had to be made right away because it was placed on us at that time that if we didn't make that decision now, that the funding was gone. And which we all know now, sitting around the table or sitting at our tables, wasn't the case at all. So anyways, that's my point is I agree with Councillor Holmes, but I also agree with Councillor Barkwell. And there's just a couple issues that I think that we need to deal with in a public forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if someone's going to answer that. I agree with you, Councillor Patton, and I think that the way that the discussion happened and the location was chosen, we should sit in a public forum. We should talk about the location. And there are issues that Councillor Barkwell keeps bringing up that need to be discussed. But all of the reports that are on the list of the committee list, committee of the whole list, conversation, all of those things have been presented in public meetings to council. We have heard over the last 3 or 4 years from bench, primary, the fractal, we've heard all of those things in a public forum. And I think it's really important that the general population knows that. I think that the letter that you wrote, Councillor Barkwell, that went out to the media, I think that was inappropriate. Just throw that out there while I'm having this conversation. And we should talk about the location. But I don't think that it's necessary to fan the flames on every single minor detail of this solar project that has been a council priority for years. So I would like to see us sit down on July 13th and talk about it with the public present. And I look forward to it. And I hope they do bring questions, but I hope that we can focus in on that location and on what the potential is for having a solar site there. What is the potential for having a development there? They've been talking about developing that site for more than 50 years in this town. And I've only once ever seen a little fishing adventure where someone thought maybe we could put something there, but it never came to anything. So let's talk about that in a public meeting. I'm happy to do that. And I do apologize that we had that conversation in a closed meeting. When you talk about land, and the reason that this came to a closed meeting is because we were talking about a land use decision. And those are big deals, right? I also just want to throw in one more comment about the grant funding. I understand that $6 million in public taxpayer money is a lot of money, But $4.5 billion to buy a pipeline for the taxpayers of Canada is also a lot of money, and with a completely different goal than what it is that Summerland's trying to do here. We're talking about creating a place where people want to come, creating a progressive and resilient, forward-thinking project and idea that is cool. And so for those of you who think that using the term cool for a project like this is just sort of, because it's cool, that's not what I mean. I mean, it's a cultural change, it's a economic change, it's a community change. And I think that on July 13th, we should talk about things like that, because there's a lot to talk about, but most of it has to come back to that location. And on our website, the District of Summerland website, there's an entire section dedicated to this project. It's been there for years. It has all of the information on it. And so those who don't know that we're doing this in this community, I really hope that they will go and they will get informed and they will find out that this is something that Summerland is working really hard to get done for our community. It's not just for me and not just for Councillor Holmes, it's not just for Councillor Barkwell. It's actually there for everybody. And so I hope that more feedback will come and that we can keep having this conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Over to you, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too, I'm not against the solar project. I am against the way the land was selected. Bottom line, that's my only, well, that is one of my major concerns. The way it was done in a closed meeting, and we talk about open and transparent governance, shame on us all. Shame on us all. We should have had a selection of lands to be able to go public and let the public have some input. They had zero input on this land selection, zero. When other pieces of land were brought up in that closed meeting session, oh gosh, no, that wasn't included in the consultant's report. Or what about this piece of land? Well, I think that's too steep. Or what about this piece of land? Oh, it might be too dusty. You know, the decision was made before it even came to the closed meeting. So that's my biggest concern. The public should have had an opportunity. And I think the land, personally, the land that has been selected is way too valuable for all sorts of reasons that we can discuss at a later date. But that's my opinion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Traynor. Before you start speaking, Councillor Traynor, I really hope that you can help get this conversation back to where it needs to be. We're talking about a resolution or a motion that's been made and is on the.
Well, first of all, I disagree with shaming council. I find that very offensive. I think that we went into that meeting in 2019 with the best intentions, and we all know now that it shouldn't have been done that way. But I don't think, I think councils make mistakes sometimes. We've all already admitted that. How many times have we already heard that it shouldn't have been done that way? We know that. I don't think we need to keep telling ourselves that and keep hearing that. And so I don't think it's shame on me. I listened in that conversation that we had, and I remember saying, okay, well, this looks like a good selection for a possible site for a solar farm. Let's put that out to the public. That's what I remember saying. I don't remember making any concrete decisions at all. And so I thought that what I was doing was good at the time. And yes, now we realize it should have been in the public, but I don't think that we did that with bad feelings or that we were trying to hide anything at all. That's not why I ran on council. I didn't run to do things behind closed doors. And so I think that we're all good people and that there was maybe a mistake made, but we're fixing it. So I take offense when somebody tells me shame on me, because that's not why I'm here. That's just what I have to say about that. I think that for the sake of organizing our July 13th meeting, I think that we should give our CAO some direction on what we want to talk about at that meeting so that it's not all over the map and so that questions that need to be answered do get answered. And so perhaps we want to have the land use discussion at that meeting. And then if there are other meetings that need to happen, for example, further financial analysis or whatever, those can happen at a different time. I just worry that it will become too big and we want to stay focused on the really pressing questions. So perhaps on the 13th, I don't know what others think, we could dedicate that one to land use and then go from there afterwards.
Thank you, Councillor Trainer. Did I see any more hands up? Okay, Councillor Barkle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Barkle?
Yes. Hello? Hello?
I can hear
Hello?
you.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
I didn't, I wasn't offended too much by the shame comment. I figured it's a figure of speech. The problem is that we haven't had this discussion in the public forum. There may be information on the website, but there's been no public debate on the issue. And that's what we're having now. And then there's reasons for that too. We were in a turmoil with the resignation of our former CAO when we have a temporary CAO, and it's a big issue that the temporary CAO wasn't going to deal with. So I kind of feel that this is the normal course of events is coming up now because it's one of our first opportunities to bring it up. And then this whole COVID thing hit. So I don't agree that we've had plenty of openness on it, but there's reasons for that. So that's okay. So I just wanted to respond to Councillor Trainer on that part of it. And I was like her, I felt, okay, maybe it's okay. We're just putting this idea forward for public discussion. And that's kind of how the resolution reads, but we've never really put the location for public discussion. We just had more of a presentation that this was the location and isn't solar wonderful. So all the more for the meeting, which sounds like nobody wants to postpone and will be July 13th.
Okay, so thank you. That's an excellent segue. I'm going to cut off the discussion now. Let's vote on the motion that's on the table to delay this or defer it until October of 2020. And then once the vote is done, then we can have further discussion, and we need, as Councillor Trainer pointed out, we need to give some direction to Mr. Haddad and others because, yeah, I see you scratching your head, Anthony. We need to be able to do that. So I am going to call the question on the motion that's on the floor. But before that, if you could just read it again, once again, Ms. Needham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the motion on the floor is that council defer the presentation on the solar and battery storage site location and the project in general until October, when further information can be gathered.
Thank you. All in favor for the deferral? Oh, Councillor Barkle's not here.
Sorry, my battery's going dead. I'll have to switch computers.
Are you? Oh, can you just indicate your
Okay.
vote
If I don't
before you
vote,
go? Okay, so I have called the question. All in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Oh, you're in favor? Who's opposed? Okay, so I did not see a vote from Councillor Van Elfen or Councillor Patton. Are you in
favor of the deferral?
Yes.
Yes.
You're in favor of the deferral. Thank you. Councillor Van Elfen. You are in favor of the deferral. So this, the resolution is defeated. And now please, if somebody would like to bring forward either direction or another resolution, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
So if I were to form a resolution, I think that it would be that on July 13th, council convene an in-person meeting with the public in attendance, also being live streamed, and that the focus of that meeting be on the location of the proposed solar and battery storage, as well as a land use conversation to be had with public input. So that would be my original focus, and I think that having a caveat that allows for further conversation and presentation from the report, from the professionals who have commissioned the report for the solar project, need to follow from that. But I think we need to discuss the land use in a public forum before we have the conversation about all of the reports that have been done. So whether we can do it all in one day or not, I don't know. But I think on July 13th, as Councillor Traynor mentioned, it's an appropriate thing to start the conversation with the piece that got us to where we are right now. So I would make that motion if it's something someone can bring back to us.
I'm going to you again, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can share my screen, Madam Mayor, I think I've captured it with the original one. Thank you.
Thank you.
And can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes. So the original recommendation is there, and I've added in-person committee of the whole meeting as recommended, and then participate in person or electronically, and then questions regarding the solar and storage site selection.
Thank you. I just have one question. Does having it a committee of the whole meeting, does that reflect the intent of this, or is it more of a, no, I guess it is committee of the whole because we're getting questions. Okay, never mind. Okay, so if you could stop sharing your screen, and I will ask Councillor Carlson if that was the intent.
Yes, that's the intent. I wonder in the report we have, there's also a list of the other documents that have been done. I'm just wondering if that is another motion to be made, if we need to have further conversation on July 13th about whether we have all of those consultants, or if that's included in the motion for the site selection process. Because the site selection is one piece of a much longer list.
So, Madam Mayor, I'll just maybe ask Anthony, the CAO, to see if that captures, but the intention would be the site selection being about the choice of where it is and the land use, etc. So that would be, that was how I was writing the motion.
Yes, so Madam Mayor, I think the intention would be to include all relevant consultants in the site selection process to be in attendance at the meeting. Does that make sense?
I think that's appropriate, and I agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask for someone to second this motion? Councillor Holmes. Great, thank you. Okay, so time for discussion on this. Beginning with Councillor Traynor.
My question is for our CAO. Councillor Barkwell has asked for an appraisal of this property before. I think that might be necessary for our meeting on the 13th. I'm wondering what's involved in doing an appraisal, and does the rest of council, are they interested in that? Yeah, so basically I wanted to know what's involved and the cost for doing that.
Certainly, Madam Mayor. The appraisal, right now, we don't have any direction to go and undertake that study. So we certainly need direction from council to complete the appraisal for the property. And I guess there's some specific direction that I think council would need to provide us on that appraisal. We can get an appraisal based on the land that it is right now, which is the administration or institutional designation or zone. So the appraisal would look at it based on that designation. If there's direction to look at what the potential development could be, because I know that's part of the discussion as part of that appraisal, then that would need some additional work to be undertaken. And we'd have to look at, if the direction is to look at what the potential development, or what the development potential is of this site, then there's a number of consultancies that may need to be undertaken to actually get a decent or a comprehensive answer on that, because the lands are subject to obviously some servicing requirements. The lands are subject to the environmental development permit area requirements, which are the overlay for those lands, which would need to be reviewed, and the geotechnical conditions, those sort of things. So I guess council would need to provide, I guess, the direction in terms of what type of information you'd like to get from that assessment, so that we can be very clear to whoever we look at to get that information.
Thank you. I have Councillor Barkwell and Councillor Van Elfen, but I just need to ask a question of our CAO following up what you just said. So Anthony, if the intent of the appraisal would be to do it for appraisal on highest and best use, maybe residential, maybe not. But my understanding is that is what Councillor Barkwell has brought up in the past, is for residential development up there. I'm hearing from you that it's more than just asking somebody to do an appraisal. There's quite a bit more that goes into that. I'm wondering if I'm wondering if there would be how we can communicate. I guess this is the question. How we can communicate with no uncertainty that even though we may be, depending on how this vote goes and this discussion and the vote goes, that even though we may be looking at an appraisal based on the land use changing to residential, that doesn't suggest in any way that is something that we are going to be looking at with a surety. Have I made myself clear? I just want everyone, including council, to understand that if we decide to go down this road and spend the extra money to do this, that it doesn't mean that, okay, we're going to look at residential there instead. How do we communicate that?
Yeah, through the chair, Madam Mayor. So to allow residential development on these lands, there's an OCP change that would have to be made. There's a zoning change that would have to be made. So I think if there's direction for council to provide this information or to request this, the appraisal, it would be based on the, I guess, the potential for residential to occur there. Obviously, with any residential change to the OCP or zoning, there's a public process that would have to happen as well, whether that's the district that undertook that or another party.
Thank you. I have, let's see, Councillor Barkle, then Councillor Van Elfen, and then Councillor Carlson.
This land is in the urban growth area already, so would there necessarily be a OCP change for development on that land?
Yes, through the chair, Madam Mayor, the OCP designation, just let me get the information up on the screen. And I think it's, if I can just put share my screen just so we have all the information in front of council. Bear with me for a minute while I get the mapping system to cooperate. Okay, apologies, give me 2 minutes and I'll try and see if I can get the mapping up.
I'll just make some comments while you're working on that. The appraisal, really maybe could only be a sort of a higher level, because council has the opportunity to make a lot of decisions regarding that land, regarding the density that we would like to see, whether we would make it areas of townhomes and affordable housing. There's some view lots and stuff. So the value would depend on, or the mix of housing, even if you just broadly said housing. So, and that's a whole nother conversation as to what sort of direction council might want to give regards to the mix of housing that could potentially be up there. We've had presented to us a couple of options already of about 70 housing units, mixture of houses and townhomes and such. That's just two proposals. Anyhow, I'll leave that with Anthony maybe to figure out what can be done. And the other question I think we need for a meaningful discussion is what will be the lifetime? How long do we anticipate this project being in that location, if that was going to be the location? Just calling it temporary doesn't really fit the bill here. You need to know, even if Councillor Holmes thinks you can't do meaningful financial calculations, but still it's part of the overall urban planning for our town.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barkle. Just to respond, and I'm going to share my screen now so we can see. So up on the screen now, if council can see the map, that's the urban growth boundary map from the official community plan. So just zooming down to the subject property and back up. There we go. So the subject lands are in this area. So the area shaded in the yellow is the urban growth boundary with the district. And I'll flick to the official community plan map. And this is the official community plan future land use designation, Schedule C. Can council see that? I just want to make sure we've got that up on the screen. And I'll just go back down to property that has the information in blue. So the district land is in blue, and that is the administration or institutional designation. So for any residential development to happen on those lands, the designation would need to change. And the zoning is administrative as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Barkle? Okay, so then over to Councillor Van Elfen and then Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too would like an appraisal done on this property for its best and best use in like a residential appraisal and at the maximum density. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson?
So I just have a question about this. We've talked about having an appraisal, and it was a motion that came up a few months ago that was defeated. Now, the reason that I would have voted against it is because we're not selling this piece of land. And so I'm just wondering, maybe it's better that Councillor Barkle answers it, but why get an appraisal on a piece of land that we're not selling? We haven't had that conversation. Perhaps on July 13th, we'll have that conversation about whether or not we'd rather sell this piece of land than use it for this project. So and then if we go ahead and choose a different location to put this project on, are we going to get an appraisal on that piece of land? Do we get an appraisal on all 105 pieces of land that the district owns that were looked at as site opportunities for this? I just wonder where, or is it only because it's in the urban growth area and there's potential perhaps over the last 50 years to develop it? I just need some clarity, please.
Councillor Barkle?
Yes, I can respond to that. First, maybe I'd like to comment on a comment that we've heard a number of times, that it's never been developed in the past. So why would you expect we're going to see it developed in the future? And I just don't understand that kind of reasoning. I think one of our fellow councillors kind of pointed out that we've never put a for sale sign on there. It was held in abeyance for a long time because of the potential for a agricultural college. And then when that kind of fell off the table, it wasn't discussed any further. It's certainly been out there for discussion. I campaigned in 2014 to see that area developed. And why you would want to know the value is if you're trying to choose between two parcels of land, you would naturally put in the equation, at least in the broad terms, as one's expensive, one's cheap. Where would you put, and one has this alternative use that is of more value versus a use that is probably of little value. That's really not hard to see, but it's hard to put precise numbers to. I think I had one more thought about that, but I'll have to stop here because I don't remember what it was.
All right. Councillor Trainer, is your hand up, or before you begin though, Councillor Trainer, I just want to say something. I guess I was going to say to Councillor Barker, but really it's to all of council. And it made me think of this again when Councillor Carlson was talking just a few minutes ago and asking for some clarification. One of the things that we need to talk about, and we have over the last several years as we've been talking about the solar project and more recently about the preferred location, and I say preferred because that's where we are right now. We are at the preferred location. We haven't made that final decision. Is whether or not that particular area, so the toe of Cartwright, is something that we as a council would like to see in residential development. Regardless of the density, there are pluses in that it's district-owned land. It's currently in the urban growth area, but we need to think about the minuses about that. We heard again this afternoon that affordable housing, we have heard from so many people, if you think that affordable housing or that housing is going to be affordable up there, you kind of need to give your head a shake. Certainly residential, but affordable housing, certainly not anything that would be affordable under my household income. But there are other things that we need to consider. We need to consider, like we've talked a little bit about, with building in floodplains. We need to talk about building in interface areas. Things are changing, and there is no stopping climate change, which at least to some degree is the reason that we're having this flooding, this high water. The reason that we have had, luckily not last year, but we've had two consecutive unheard of, unprecedented wildfire seasons. So do we really want people to be living in an area that's surrounded by trees on the top of a hill with limited access? You know, there's the fire considerations, there's all kinds of considerations. If we look at doing an appraisal based on residential, I'm just concerned that there is a lot more discussion that needs to take place before we even consider, I mean, outside of the public discussion that needs to be held, before we even consider, like, why waste the money? Why spend the money? I shouldn't say waste, but you know, maybe it is a waste. Why spend the money on getting this work done and the appraisal when development up there, regardless of the fact that it's in the urban growth area, it's only in the urban growth area if there's the sanitary sewer, and there's not the sanitary sewer out there yet. And the costs associated with the sanitary sewer, not putting it in, we all know that that's the developer's cost, but it is all of the taxpayers' cost when it comes to maintaining it and upgrading it and replacing it down the road. So I think that if we're going to go down this road of looking at spending the extra money and the time on getting appraisal there with a with the possibility of having a residential, whatever the number of houses that are up there, you know, I think Councillor Barker, you said between 70 and 80 or something, not necessarily houses, but living spaces. I think that we need to have a further discussion, not only amongst council, but also out in the public. We have to have that anyways, because it would be a change in the OCP, about whether or not this is the spot for residential development. We have long said we need to get development in areas that are serviced currently, especially in our downtown area, or places that are close, within 10 or 15 minutes walking. I have no understanding of why we would look at having an appraisal done on having a residential development, regardless of if it's, you know, 50 homes or 150 homes up in that area, without having further discussion. Councillor Traynor.
I asked a question about the appraisal just because I totally recognize everything that you just said. You have valid points, but I feel like that's a question that the public's going to ask. And so I was just kind of wondering if there's some way that we can get some kind of value for best use on that property for the purposes of discussing it in relationship to the solar farm, so that we can somehow advance this. And so I don't know how exactly appraisals work, but is there a way that we can get some kind of number that gives us a starting point for our discussion on the 13th, so that we're not just all kind of guessing? And yeah. And also I was wondering too, I had asked the CAO if there's a price or what it would cost to do it, but I realized that it's also can be very complex depending on what we ask. So is there some kind of middle ground?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think the appraisals, likely going to come back with a range because of some of the work that would need to be undertaken to actually get you as close to an exact cost as possible. And the appraisal is just the best. It's a scenario based on the scenario that at that point in time for a residential development, for example. So as I mentioned, there's obviously some overlays on this property with the environmental, the topography, those sort of things. We do have information on the geotechnical, the environmental hazards, I guess, that those reports are done. So there is some new information, I guess, that would contribute to an assessment of those lands around the contaminated site potential that was a concern earlier. So we do have some more information. The larger, at the end of the day, you're probably not going to get an exact answer until you complete a complete assessment, or I guess a neighborhood plan for that entire area, which includes the district lands, the Deer Ridge, and some of those additional areas in the growth area, which will look at sewer, all the servicing capacities and those sort of things. So the appraisal will give you a snapshot, and I guess that's some information. It'll hopefully help, if that's the direction we get from council, to get this piece of work done, provide council with at least the opportunity cost that may be missed out on if the solar project did go here versus a residential development, just so you have that information in your decision-making process.
Thank you, Anthony. And Councillor Trainer, I wasn't suggesting that this was a ridiculous thing to put forward. So sorry for my rant. I realize it went on for a bit. Councillor Barkwell, did you have your hand up again? Yeah. Okay. You're.
Hey, Madam Mayor, you kind of took us off in another direction again about questioning the value of the whether we want to have development there at all, and my only response to that has to be, like, if not there, then when or where? Hunters Hill certainly isn't going to be affordable. Townhouses are going to be somewhat more affordable than, say, subsidized housing or something in town. There, to suggest that infill in our current serviced area is going to suffice is not my information. Our official community plan says that we need, for moderate growth, 1% a year, 55 new units a year. So I just don't see where they come from. But if we've got a planning staff who tell us that we don't need that land and won't need it in the next 25 years and can show me why, then I would say, you're right to question whether we would want to consider developing
it. Councillor Carlson in just a second, then Councillor Holmes. Just to respond to what Councillor Barkwell just said. What I was raising was not an answer to your question. If not there, then where? What I was raising was what we've been hearing and what we've been seeing in this community and throughout Canada and other areas too, globally, about making these changes. We've heard quite clearly from the provincial government, and when I say we, I don't mean us as a council, with the flooding in Grand Forks as an example. Yes, we helped with bailing you out there, but you need to think as a community, as a local government, you need to think if you're going to continue allowing people to build in areas where these natural hazards are, especially as we move forward into climate change. So that's what I was saying. We need to have that discussion. And it's a big discussion. I recognize that. And I also recognize that what Councillor Trainer is suggesting is, a solution to the matter at hand with the land use. So again, Councillor Trainer, I totally understand where you're coming from. Councillor Carlson and then Councillor Holtz.
Yeah, my first comment is that it's 4 p.m.
I just noticed that. Thank you.
And the other one, I just follow up on what Councillor Barkwell just said. He suggested that if our planning staff could show him that we don't need this land for the next 25 years, then he would be okay putting solar panels up there. Is that what you just said? Because I think that it's important that you clarify that, because when we talked to, when this presentation was brought to council, albeit in a closed session, that's what we were discussing from the professionals from our planning department. And when we asked Mr. Matuzzi, when he was the CAO, interim CAO, if it was a good decision to put something like this there, whether it's short term or long term, you know, there is that opportunity cost. But I believe his suggestion was that, well, you don't really have a lot to lose, especially if you're not selling that land and if there's no one knocking down your door trying to build it right now. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify, and if there's something that staff might be able to bring forward by July 13th to discuss potential land use over the next 25 years within what's currently available if this weren't an opportunity.
Yes, Councillor Barkwell, and then we'll go to Councillor Holmes.
I can respond to that. That was one of my huge objections. If I recall that meeting.
Oh, sorry, could I, sorry, Councillor Barkwell, could I interrupt just a sec? I just remembered, thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Carlson, that we're over time. We need to have a resolution to extend this meeting. Is anyone in favor of putting that resolution forward? Putting a motion forward? Councillor Van Elfen, could you give us a time frame?
$4:30.
$4:30? Okay, seconded. Okay, good. I see the young mums are seconding that. So all in favor? Any opposed? Richard, you're not opposed, or Councillor Barkwell, you're not opposed, right?
No,
okay, thank you.
And maybe I was too fast.
Okay, and Councillor Holmes, your turn now. No, sorry, Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Holmes.
I'll be quick. That was one of my big objections at the closed meeting, besides the fact that I hadn't really had time to think about this, and the temporary nature of the project was one of the things I hadn't really sunk in during that discussion. The other thing that really had hit was that suddenly we had planning staff saying something that was entirely different, and when that we didn't need this land. And when I asked for confirmation of that, I got a lot of pretty much unsubstantial broad generalizations and that from our CAO, and you know, and basically no support to get any further information. So if that's our former CAO, let me be clear. And so yeah, I think that, you know, I think it's fair to say that land use needs are part of the question here.
Did you get a response, an answer to your question, Councillor Carlson?
I did kind of. I just wonder if the CAO might also be able to respond briefly. Is there something that within the time frame would be able to be presented in a public meeting from staff, perhaps an updated perspective and outlook? I know it's really hard to do, especially during a pandemic when we have no idea what's going to happen to our markets. But if there's anything you could add, I'd appreciate that.
For sure, Madam Mayor, I think there's potential for us to get the existing approved lots that we have within the district and in existing approved lots that have servicing in the district. So once you get a sense of how many parcels of land that exist in the district for future development, then you can start to build in some I guess, assumptions on growth rates and use the census data that we already have to give us an indication of the, I guess, the uptake on an annual basis. We do have some direction within the OCP that we'll have to rely on that predicts how quickly the community is going to grow. We can certainly update that information with any additional data that we have from the 2016 census, for example. So, yeah, I think getting the information on how many approved subdivided parcels, single family parcels, for example, or within the district is certainly some information that will help council see what availability of land use is around there, in addition to the available parcels for the development downtown. So I think there's some fairly high level density calculations that we could put together based on the information that we already have. It'll take a bit of work, but getting that together in a month is reasonable. It'll take some time and dedicated time, but certainly something that we can do for council.
So I only ask because I want to make sure that if that's the kind of information that will help make this conversation more valuable to our community, I think that we should be bringing that forward. And I recognize that it is a difficult thing to do, especially when we talk about the redevelopment potential of so much of aging neighborhoods and things. I think that's something that is very hard to predict, but I also know that 25 years from now, we will be having this conversation all over again, regardless of where the solar project goes. So yeah, thank you for that.
Sorry, I will add, Madam Mayor, that we are about to undertake the housing needs assessment in the community, which would be perfect for this type of analysis. But that process is just beginning with the regional district. We're close to, I believe, obtaining a consultant to do that work with the regional district, City of Penticton, and the District of Summerland through a partnership. So that information is probably likely 4 to 6 months out. However, we can gather the data that we do have and be in a position to present that to council on July 13th, if that's the direction.
Good, thank you. Councillor Holmes, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson may be having this conversation 25 years from now, but I can guarantee you I won't be. I will. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to do an appraisal if we're not selling the property. I think best use, best value, it's a pretty subjective thing. I don't understand why having an agricultural there would be a best use, but then having another piece of public infrastructure there all of a sudden isn't a best use. So if you're talking right down to dollars and cents, then having the municipal hall where it is isn't the best use for that building. Having all our recreation and cultural amenities downtown aren't the best use for those lands. And we might as well put all those things out in the rodeo grounds and then sell and make a whole lot of money off those lands. And so, but that that sort of thing was tried in the 70s, and it completely gutted the communities out, and it doesn't really work because you need to build community, and so you have to keep these sort of things in mind too when you're building, because if you just I think we have to get out of this way of thinking where building houses somehow drives our economic activity. It somehow builds community. Nobody wants to live in a place that just has houses and nothing else. And this is kind of, we talked about the cool factor that Councillor Carlson was talking about before. There has to be cool things all around the community for people to actually want to live here. And houses, unfortunately, aren't that cool, except your own. And I just want to say one other thing, that I hear a lot of people say they're not against the project, they're only against the location. It would really be helpful then if we're not constantly being bombarded with information which basically undermines the entire project, such as saying that it's not a clean energy project saying that dismissing the resilience needs, dismissing the economic benefits of the project. These sort of things undermine the project and have nothing to do with the location. And it seems to me that there's an orchestrated campaign in this community to sabotage this whole project. And and I really would like that to stop. And it's not, it's nothing to do with the location. It's the project. And so you can't really say that you're okay with the project, it's just the location, but then dismiss the entire project, undermine the whole project. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barkville.
Yeah, wasn't bothered by the word used earlier when somebody said something about shame on council, but I certainly don't agree with Councillor Holmes to suggest that putting out the facts of the case, such as it's not a greenhouse gas emission reduction project, is sabotage. That's, if you want to argue, don't argue with me, argue with the BC Utilities Commission and their assessment. That's where that information came from. Things like that. That's not, let's put it all honestly on the table. That's what I would call it.
I appreciate what you just said, Councillor Barkville. Putting it all honestly on the table is terrific. Putting it out in the media, your thoughts. I think that was Councillor Carlson maybe that spoke about this a little bit earlier. I don't think that's on. I don't think that it is fair for the rest of council, for one thing. I don't think that that shows in my opinion, a satisfactory level of integrity. And by doing so, you are suggesting that this is a debate that should be held in the corridors of the media and on display for the media and all of their readership. I don't think, it gets back to our whole communication policy that we've talked about several times in the last, well, since this council was elected. I don't think, well, I for one am not comfortable or particularly pleased with the way that you have gone about bringing attention to this matter by putting it out in the public as a letter to the editor. Pardon me, Councillor Van Helfen, I saw your hand up first, then Councillor Holmes, and then back to Councillor Barkville. It is 4:17.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Lost you there for a minute. Couldn't hear you at the end of your talk. Are we still on the topic about an appraisal or not? Is that still on the table?
Yes, we haven't had a vote yet.
Thank you.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. Just in response to Councillor Barkwell, sure, let's be honest and let's put it all on the table. And, so for example, in your letter today, you talked about the National Energy Regulators, the economics of solar power in Canada study that states solar power would cost 146% of the price of hydro. But what you conveniently left out is that's based on the figure right now in the present time, based on a flat fee model. And if it was on the smart meter model, right now would be 118%. And you can't really consider just right now because we're talking about the future here. And so the future cost is at 108% of the flat rate and 87% in the future with a smart meter rate, which is what we're talking about. And our own consultants' research said that without $6 million federal funding, the economic viability of the project would be even Stevens, that the costs would and savings would basically cancel each other out. And so you could argue it's still worth doing. And with that $6 million from the feds, it's certainly worth doing. So, and then when you talk about the Kimberley Sun Mine and using that as an example of why it's a failed project, well, that's an unfair comparison. You can't talk about Kimberley without talking about some place like Sterling, Massachusetts, and all these other things. You know, when you're making comparisons, it's you can't just single out one place and ignore all the others. And you can't look at this project in the narrow definition of a solar farm, which is what Kimberley is. You have to, because Kimberley doesn't own their own electricity utility. There's so many factors like that. So if you want to be honest, be honest.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell, you have the last say, and then we need to vote because we only have 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I would point out that we don't have smart meters in Summerland, and smart meters have never ever been discussed in Summerland. So what we're talking about is building a solar project now, not something in the future. And when you make comparisons to something that is of an equal latitude and sunshine. You don't compare it to Utah or the desert somewhere. You talk about here and now. There is probably more, but let's wrap this up and this. But I do want to add that I do think that all these things should be in the public domain, and they haven't been, and it's been frustrating trying to get it out to the public domain. And so now we're there, and I'm happy, and it's the same information, whether it's done now or later or however it got out there.
Karen, could I have you read the motion again, please?
Sorry. The motion that we have with regards to an appraisal. No. Yeah, I was going to say I didn't see a
We
motion.
don't have one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we did have a motion.
We're still discussing the one I put forward, right?
Correct. Correct. So the motion is the one that council convene an in-person committee of the whole meeting on July 13th, 2020 at 1 p.m. to receive a presentation of the solar and storage project detailed site analysis results and recommendations as outlined in the staff report dated April 14th, 2020, and that council provide an opportunity for the community to participate in person or electronically at the meeting, whereby council can hear feedback from the community, and staff and all relevant consultants can answer questions from council related to the solar and storage site selection.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question now on the one that Karen just read out. That's the one that's on the floor. All in favor? Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, so none, so that is carried. Councillor Trainer.
Anthony, do you need a motion to do some kind of appraisal on this property?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure how to word this because I don't know what type of an appraisal it would be, but if we could get an appraisal on this property for the 13th with information that would be valuable for the public and for us with regards to, I guess, best use of that property in terms of residential.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, through the chair, Madam Mayor, I think as long as there's direction to look at the appraisal for future residential use, that at least will provide some direction for the appraiser to get that information back to us, so we can present that back to council and the community.
Yes, that captures what I meant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Elfen, are you seconding? Thank you. Okay, so further discussion on this. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe to help out our CAO in regards to this, would it be prudent that we gave Anthony the subdivision design that Mr. Ager had put forward years ago?
He has it?
Yeah, he's got it. Would that be prudent? Then at least then it would give some idea in regards to what we were looking at for land prices. The only other thing that we could look at then is maybe we want to look again at the water treatment plant where we've got all that land, and we could move the solar over there. That would be really good. Anyways, another story, another day. Thanks.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think the appraiser is certainly going to look at the densities that exist in the surrounding area and likely apply some of those considerations to potential use of this land as well. So the appraiser, they're obviously an independent review of the potential for residential here, so they'll have their considerations in there as well. But as long as there's that direction, if council provide it, to look at the potential for residential there, then at least we'll have that information to move forward on.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, considering you have to base it on something, I liked Councillor Patton's suggestion. It has a mixture of uses and probably a somewhat higher density than what is there now, because everybody there now has to be on a septic system, and the premise here is that we would be extending the sewer system up to the area, and higher densities, which we all seem to agree is a goal, is on that plan is probably higher than the surrounding, as our CEO referred to. So I would suggest that that would be kind of a minimum anyway.
And yeah, Madam Mayor, we do have that plan, so we can certainly use that as a basis if that's the direction from council.
Okay, Councillor Traynor.
I just want to add that this appraisal, in my opinion, gives us one angle of looking at this property, like one value through a particular lens. As Councillor Holmes had mentioned before, there's also the value, if a solar project was to go there, of the economics that could spin off of that project and all the environmental and everything else. So that also has a dollar value. And so I just want to remind everybody that I think it's useful to have this appraisal, but it is only one way of looking at the value of the land, but I think it's an important part.
Thank you. Do we need to have Karen read the motion again, or are we good? We're good. Okay. I will call the question. Oliver? Aaron, can you not hear me?
Sorry, it just cut out when you were saying it, but I believe you said all in favor, so.
Yes, I did say all in favor. Okay. And any opposed? Councillor Holmes, I'm with Councillor Holmes on this one. So that is carried, and that's all you need, Mr. Haddad. Okay. Councillor Carlson.
I would just like to ask if Councillor Barkwell would be willing to write another letter to the media to let him know that there's a few things happening and that there'll be a public meeting on July 13th, and hopefully people will be able to give their input and participate. That's just a personal request to you.
Go ahead.
There'll probably be some more letters to the paper, but I invite you to send your own letter and put it in your own words.
No, I don't intend to have a debate in the local newspapers. I just think that it's worth, now that there's one out there and there's updated information and conversation that's been had, I think it's worth keeping the public informed just in case they haven't been able to watch this invigorating 3.5-hour meeting.
I would suggest that if I hadn't written that letter, we might not have had this wonderful conversation.
Then make sure people know how to find it. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we're done. Yeah, I think, and I won't say anything more. Okay, so could I have somebody bring forward adjournment, please? Councillor Van Elfen, seconded by Councillor Bartley. No, it's not necessary.
What about the
And-
public? There may be some public
Okay,
comment.
so we're adjourned for 29.
No public comment before we adjourn?
Oh, pardon me. Thank you very much. But first we're almost at 4:30. So could I have someone bring forward a motion to extend this for, I
Madam
guess,
Mayor, there's no
20 minutes, if necessary? Is there anybody that is waiting to speak? Maybe that's the first question.
No, there isn't. No, there is not.
There isn't anyone.
There is no public.
Okay, thank you. There's no public waiting to speak. Okay, so I will ask again for adjournment then. Okay, and all in favor? Yay, 4:30. Thank you. Thank you for keeping me on my toes, Councillor Carlson.